We okay, Madam Secretary? Excellent. Good morning to all attending the RTA's meeting of the Board of Directors. I want to review the guidelines for our meeting this morning. First, for the board members who are in person, please turn on your microphones when you wish to speak and off when you are done so that we limit the static and make sure only one person talks at a time as these meetings are recorded. I'll call on those with questions or comments for those attending in person. For any members calling in remotely, keep your audio on mute as much as possible to minimize the background noise. As I've said, this meeting is being recorded. When you have a question or comment, you're good at it now, raise your virtual hand and the board secretary will call on you, and try to remember to put your hand down virtually after you speak. With that said, I'll now call the meeting of the Board of Directors of the Regional Transportation Authority to order. And while everyone in person, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you all. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Sure. Good morning. Director Indalcio. Dr. Carey. Here. Dr. Colson.
Here.
Dr. Fuentes.
Here.
Dr. Gathing.
Here.
Dr. Gorman. Here. Dr. Groven.
Here.
Dr. Holt.
Here.
Dr. Cattell.
Here.
Dr. Lewis.
Here.
Dr. Melvin. Dr. Pang.
Yes.
Dr. Ross.
Here.
Dr. Sager. And Chairman Dillard.
Present.
There are 12 present, including Director Cattell, and 3 absent.
Excellent. We have a quorum as we always do, which is great. Thank you all for your attendance. Item 3 is the approval of the minutes from the board meeting held last month on October 19th of 2023. Any comments or corrections? Seeing none, how about a motion in a second? Director Lewis moves, seconded by Director Ross, that we approve the minutes from October 19th of 2023. Madam Secretary, can you take a roll call, please?
Dr. Indalcio. Dr. Carey.
Aye.
Dr. Colson.
Aye.
Dr. Fuentes.
Aye.
Dr. Gathing.
Aye.
Dr. Gorman.
Aye.
Dr. Groven.
Aye.
Dr. Holt.
Yes.
Dr. Cattell.
Yes.
Aye.
Dr. Lewis.
Yes.
Dr. Melvin. Dr. Pang.
Yes.
Dr. Ross.
Yes.
Dr. Sager. And Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
12 yeses.
And item 3 is approved. Item 4 is the public comments segment of the meeting. Any comments received will now be read into the record by the board secretary. I see her shaking her head no. So is there anybody here today that would like to speak? Members of the public that would like to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 5, which is Executive Director Leanne Redden's report. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning. I was expecting actually some speakers. So good morning, Chairman Dillard, members of the board, and our many guests that we have here with us today. I'm also welcoming CTA, PACE, and Metro leadership who are here with us today to present their budgets to you and hopefully engage in a pretty robust conversation after that. I also want to thank and acknowledge those who have submitted public comments to us. We have had some feedback as well along the way. And I and all of us here share the passion for our regional transit system, that our riders, that our system is the system that our riders and our region deserves. We need the experience and the voices from the advocates to really help us achieve that system. And we appreciate the time that those that have taken time to public comment, and I'm assuming there'll be more as we continue our hearings to provide that feedback to us. So next slide, please. So the bulk of my report, if we can advance the slides. Thank you. So just a quick update on some of the legislative activities. In Washington, Congress is continuing to work to reach consensus on the 2024 government funding levels, including transit funding for the Chicago region. On Tuesday, the House passed a short-term funding bill that will avert a government shutdown from starting what would have been this Saturday. The bill will fund some portions of government, including transportation and specifically public transit until mid-January and through the rest of February at the current spending levels. The Senate is expected to quickly take up and pass this continuing resolution this week, and the President is expected to sign it, so that ultimately pushes back the deadline for an agreement on the 2024 spending levels to early next year. Earlier this month, I and other agency executives met with Representative Quigley to discuss the needs of legacy transit systems, including the fiscal crisis that we face because of years of underfunding. We emphasized the need for sustainable funding and the important role that the federal government can play in supporting our transit system and advancing the activities and the policies that we have. Moving to the General Assembly, lawmakers concluded their fall legislative session earlier this month. And they, during that time, they passed Senate Bill 1769, which requires that all vehicles owned by a unit of government must be zero emissions by 2030. We're working with the service board to determine whether these provisions will affect their fleets. Lawmakers are scheduled to return back to Springfield January 16. And at the beginning of this month, we also organized and were hosted by the service boards for a tour of capital projects on the south side of the city of Chicago with lawmakers as well as advocates. On November 6th, we held a news conference here at our offices to announce the program we've discussed with you at a couple of previous meetings, which was to provide $500,000 in prepaid transit cards to survivors of gender-based violence. And those cards and that program is being distributed through The Network, which is a nonprofit organization that advocates to end domestic violence. I was joined by Senators Villanueva and Don DeWitt, as well as senators, and then Representative Cam Buckner was also in attendance with us. We were also joined by the Network Executive Director, Amanda Pryon, and Lauren Gutierrez from the Metropolitan Family Services. And she is now being appointed to the RTA's Citizens Advisory Board to provide her insights, but also to support us in the transparency around this program as it advances forward. And my thanks to Chairman Dillard and all of those who attended that event. So next slide, please. Just a quick reminder about where we are in the actual overall budget process, the regional budget process. We at RTA continue to visit each county for budget presentations and also make our staff available to residents for in-person public comment after all of those meetings. That public comment period continues to be open and will close on December 7. We certainly hope that each of you are able to join us for the presentations in your specific areas. I know some of you have already done that. So as we continue the others, we look forward to more discussion at our final Transit is the Answer Coalition meeting of the year, which will be in person here in this building on the 22nd floor on Tuesday morning, December 5th. At our virtual public hearing on the overarching 2024 regional budget and 5-year capital program that will be on Thursday, December 7 from 4 to 6 p.m. Registration for both the coalition meeting as well as the public hearing is required, and links for those are available on our website. If anyone needs any more information, let us know and we will get you that as well. We will vote on the regional budget and the 5-year capital program at the December 14 meeting, our regular meeting next month. So next slide, please. So just a quick look at the agenda for today. Directly after my report, you'll hear from CTA, followed by PACE, and then concluding with Metra on their respective budgets. And after that, I hope we have a good discussion following their presentations and keep working with us as we hopefully have them answer your questions today in preparation for the December meeting. Final items on the agenda include an ordinance approving a contract for a broker for the loss financing plan, which is the insurance coverage that we have for the excess liability that we partner with the 3 service boards on, and then approval of some travel expense reimbursements. So that concludes my report. And Mr. Chairman, I will hand it back to you.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? If not, we'll move on to the heart of our meeting today, which are the presentations and discussion of 2024 budgets of the CTA, PACE, and Metra. I think what we'll do, the order is going to be CTA, PACE, and Metra. So President Carter, I saw Dorval out there. Good morning, sir. How are you? You can introduce your team if you would, Mr. President, although they're well known to most of us. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Chairman Dillard. It's good to see everyone again and have the opportunity to talk to you about CTA's budget. What I plan to do is give an overview of the overall budget itself, and then I will have my Chief Financial Officer, Jeremy Fine, give you a little bit more detail on the budget, along with Michelle Curran, who's the Deputy CFO and Comptroller. Also with me here today is Mike Connolly, the CTA Chief Planning Officer, Tom McCone, the CTA Chief Administrative Officer, Sam Smith, my Vice President of Government and Community Relations, and Juan Pablo Pierto, my Director of Diversity Programs. So I think we have a good team here to answer any questions that you may have, not only about our budget, but about CTA's operations in general. It is my pleasure to be with you here today to discuss CTA's 2024 operating budget of $1.99 billion, which is truly a reflection of our agency's values, putting a high premium on providing the highest level of service, employee and customer comfort, as well as modernization and equity. The spending plan holds the line on all fares, and it assumes pre-pandemic levels of service that we are moving to as we aggressively hire the personnel necessary to operate that level of service, all while continuing to make important investments to upgrade and modernize the system. I want to stop for a second just to reemphasize what I said about service. As you know, this past year, we have been engaging in an optimization effort that really was the need to align our service with the workforce that we had available. This is not an unusual issue. It's been affecting just about every industry that you probably engage with every day as part of our daily lives. And CTA has been working very aggressively to get our workforce back. I'm proud to tell you that as we conclude this year, we have stabilized our workforce, have seen an improvement in the quality of service that we're providing, albeit at an optimized level. And we have started to grow the workforce as we move forward. Next year, we intend to continue that trend, and as part of that, start to reinstitute the service that we had optimized in order to take advantage of the workforce that I will have available to do that. When I started this process over a year and a half ago, I made the commitment that we would basically adjust our service to reflect our workforce levels so that we could provide more service relative to schedule and more reliable service than we were providing before that. Today, our service levels reflect the fact that we're providing anywhere between 98 and 99% of scheduled service. So we have reached our goal of providing more reliable service, albeit at an optimized level. The next step, as I committed to a year and a half ago, was to start to grow that service so that we can get back to our pre-pandemic levels, which, as I'll discuss in a second, is in line with what we're seeing occur with our ridership. So I want the board to understand that, because there's been a lot of public discussion and debate about what CTA is or is not doing. And I think it's important, particularly as you move forward with the regional budget, to understand what CTA's plans are for next year and how we have basically implemented our strategy to get us to a better place to allow us to do the things that we want to do going forward. The budget calls for a 9.2% increase, which is about $168.2 million over the previous year's budget, and supports CTA's ongoing workforce initiatives for hiring and retaining key operations personnel, while introducing several new measures that will help move the overall customer experience with things like enhanced security and improved Venture fare system features. I am proud to also share that throughout 2023, CTA system ridership grew steadily, reaching a pandemic-era high of more than 25.83 million rides during the month of September. And although we are still calculating figures for this month, I can share that the first week of October, we have seen almost 6.33 million rides, which is the highest weekly total since the start of the pandemic. These ridership increases are in part a reflection of our strategic efforts over the last year to strengthen the customer experience through more consistent and reliable service, affordable and integrated path products, for which I thank not just my staff, but also the staff of PACE and Metra, who have worked collaboratively with us to implement those products. Safe rides, clean facilities, modern amenities, dynamic customer engagement tools, and a strong CTA workforce. For our customers and employees, we continue to invest in measures that enhance the transit riding experience for all of our riders. This includes Refresh and Renew, CTA's ongoing rail station and employee workplace improvement program. This year, we're making 6.5 million in improvements to nearly 30 stations, more in bus turnaround areas, and 7 employee work areas, making them cleaner, brighter, and safer for all. To assist CTA riders who are unsheltered, as well as those grappling with mental health and substance abuse, we've also invested $2 million to expand our partnership with Chicago Department of Family and Support Services, also known as DFSS. With these funds, they have added personnel deployed to conduct outreach and connect impacted riders with the resources they need, such as housing, medical care, and social services. Among the many highlights of this expanded outreach has been securing housing for 25 individuals that once used CTA as their place of shelter. In regards to safety and security, so far in 2023, the Chicago Police Department has been reporting a decreasing trend in crimes on CTA. And according to their latest data, in September, overall transit crime was down 12% year to date and down 12% compared to September of 2022. Violent crime was also down 9% year to date. These declines are in part due to our continued investment in various security measures, including the deployment of 2-person K9 teams, installation of real-time station camera monitors in all of our customer assistant booths, as well as the replacement of bus driver barriers with new ones that are providing better protection and coverage. Since the start of the pandemic, federal funding has been crucial to allow transit agencies across the country, including the CTA, to maintain their operations. Federal relief funding will help the CTA close a projected $473 million budget gap in 2024 and allow the agency to continue providing as much service as possible with this available workforce. Despite the financial challenges, the CTA continues to look for ways to operate more efficiently and effectively and to best serve the region. And I should note, CTA has been doing its part to operate more efficiently in recent years. And since 2015, we have identified $1 billion in cumulative savings from CTA's operations. I would also point out that if you look at the overall administrative overhead costs for CTA, it is not only one of the best that you would see amongst our peers in this industry, it is also one of the better overhead rates that you see for any corporate 500 private sector company that operates for profit. We are a lean, I was going to say mean, but I don't want us to be mean. We are a lean and efficient operation. And as even CMAP noted in their part report, we may have reached a point where we have become too efficient. And that may be starting to impact our ability to provide the levels of service that we want to provide going forward. Despite these financial challenges, CTA continues to look for the best ways to operate, as I indicated. And CTA also is focused on its capital improvement program. Our capital improvement program is a $3.6 billion program with projects over the next 5 years. The budget reflects CTA's ongoing commitment towards modernization and improvement of its physical infrastructure, tracks, rail stations, buses and trains, facilities, and technologies. Among the many important investments that we are most excited about is the Red Line extension, which will extend the CTA's busiest rail line to the southern city limits and will provide greatly improved transit service to those people on the far south side of the city of Chicago. Other capital projects that we continue to or will begin in 2024 include CTA's all-station accessibility program. Hello? 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 Should I just try?
Try this.
Hello? Hello? This one isn't working either. Nothing's working. Talk louder.
Here we go.
Hello? Okay. Where was it? Oh, CJ's All-Station Accessibility Program, the Bus System Electrification Program, which you heard Leanne speak about earlier, the Rail and Bus Fleet Modernization Program, as well as our ongoing state of good repair projects and more. We remain committed to working in close collaboration with the regional service boards on a variety of matters, from the planning of cross-agency service plans and measures, like the shared fare products I mentioned earlier, to establishing policies. Okay. To establishing policies to help shape a better future for public transit in the region. We also recognize and look forward to working closely with the RTA to make the case for additional operating and capital funding to ensure the transit needs of Chicago metropolitan area are met and expanded upon into the near future. Further, the $2.2 billion in federal relief funding CTA has been provided is expected to be exhausted in 2025. Without regard to CTA's financial condition, state of good repair needs, or unavoidable cost increases due to labor, materials, fuel, and power, and other key areas directly impacting CTA's financial condition. As you know, since the start of the pandemic, federal funding has been crucial in allowing regional and national transit agencies, including the CTA, to maintain their operations. While more and improved funding and investment is unquestionably the most important issue facing the finances for not just CTA, but also for our sister agencies at Metro and PACE, it is incumbent upon each of our agencies to work diligently to find better ways to better serve the people who take hundreds of millions of rides in our system every year and improve their travel experience. With that, I'm happy to hand things over to Jeremy Fine and Michelle Corinne from our finance department to provide you with some more insight on our financial picture. Jerry, Michelle, take it over, and then we can answer any questions that you may have about our budget.
Morning, I'm Jeremy Fine, CFO at CTA. I'll walk through a little bit more of the details here on the operating budget, then hand it over to Michelle for the capital budget. But the 2024 budget, as Dorval highlighted, is a little under $2 billion operating budget. The CIP for the 5-year period is $3.6 billion. Again, this budget does not have any fare increases incorporated into it. And it also allows, as Dorval highlighted, allows us to get back to pre-pandemic service levels. We're budgeting, assuming that we were able to get back to that. And again, that allows us to continue to hire as quickly as possible and get people out onto the front line to deliver the service that our customers are wanting and demanding to see. With regard to our ridership, we continue to see very sustained growth. And we'll get into this a little bit more later in the presentation, but the growth rate here for assumed is about a 10% over the 23 budget. This means that we end up about 2/3 of our 2019 ridership, about 63.4% as compared to 2019. As Dorval highlighted too, this requires federal relief funding of a little under $500 million, about $473 million.
Sorry, they queued to the
Okay.
camera.
Sorry.
so that-
All right. So this requires about $473 million of federal relief funding, and we expect to use about a little under $500 million to the 25 budget as well. And again, we'll drill down on that a little bit more in a moment. But that means that we have about a $50 million gap in 25, and then really facing the full fiscal cliff in 2026. Some of the things that we continue to highlight and invest in our budget is really kind of predicated upon the strategic goals of the organization. And, we're really looking at feedback from our customers and really trying again to increase hiring, getting people out there on the operator side, in the sustaining units, of maintenance and whatnot, to ensure that we can continue to deliver the best and most consistent and reliable service. So and that also kind of dovetails into the larger hiring efforts as well. And we've done, kind of historic levels of hiring across the board to again get those folks into the positions to deliver that service. With regard to safety and security, we continue to make investments both on the operating budget side as well as the capital budget. We continue to invest in, additional services, additional security services, as well as infrastructure improvements, whether it be cameras or additional monitoring within the CSA booths. Again, just trying to enhance the overall safe and secure feeling that folks have when they use the system. With regard to improving our customer facilities, again, we're working with CDOT on bus priority zones throughout the city. We look to continue to enhance the All Stations Accessibility Program, making sure that the system becomes more accessible. We also have undertaken the Forest Park rebuild on the west side of the city, as well as continuing to invest in our zero emission fleet. Again, helping the health of the city and the residents, and also just also bending the cost curve as we move forward with regard to maintenance as we move forward. We also are working on additional signage and wayfinding through the system just to make it more convenient for folks to access the system, but also making it more accessible to folks with disabilities. With regard to some of the digital tools that we're investing in through the budget, we continue to invest in improving bus and train tracker. We also have a live streaming tool now so that people can see what the crowding conditions are on the platforms before embarking on their journey. We're also continuing to improve the Ventra back end to make it more seamlessly integrated, kind of across the platform. And we're also launching a new chatbot service. Again, just trying to make it more interactive for our customers so that they have more real-time information so that they can, make the decisions about how they get back and forth from their destinations. With regard to our employees, again, we're trying to attract new employees into positions, but also a key component of this is ensuring that we retain the great talent that we already have. So we're looking at, again, trying to incentivize people to come and join the workforce at CTA, but also keep people at CTA through different measures as well. And as Leanne had highlighted in her opening remarks, we obviously have this program rolling out for domestic violence survivors, but also looking at other opportunities to continue to partnership, not only amongst the 3 service boards, but also just across the city, across the counties, across the region, continuing to work and serve the needs of the customers in any particular subgroups there. With regard to the next slide, please. With regard to the 23 forecast, we expect to end up the year about $75 million to the positive. And this is broken up, between both revenue outperformance and expense outperformance. So with regard to revenues, we continue to see favorable revenues coming in from farebox, as well as investment income. With regard to our public funding, we continue to see, outperformance from our sales tax receipts. But obviously, with regard to higher interest rates, that has had a depressing effect on the real estate transfer taxes that we receive as real estate sales have slowed. With regard to our expenses, we continue to see positive variance with regard to our labor expense. Fuel, we've undertaken a very long-term strategic initiative to lock in at very, good pricing, and that has allowed us to benefit from some fuel savings. Other expenses also continue to be a little bit lower than budgeted expectations, but service and security continued to be unfavorable as we have ramped up our hiring efforts, and that is incorporated now into the 24 budget. But overall, we end up about 75 million to the positive for 2023. With regard to 24 on the next slide, we see the 24 operating revenues at about $1.5 billion. That's about $86 million higher than the 23 budget, or about 6% growth. Again, we continue to see expected growth in our fare box revenues. We continue to expect some higher sales tax receipts. And, we will continue to need federal relief funding until the fiscal cliff gap is closed, to the tune here for 24 of about $472.5 million. With regard to our expenses, they're a little under $2 billion, about 9% higher than the 23 budget. The labor increases assume contractual wage adjustments, as well as increased costs for pension and healthcare. Materials obviously have been impacted by inflation. You see that line item continuing to grow, as well as additional vehicle parts as the fleet ages. With regard to our security services, again, this line item is higher, taking into consideration the increases that we've been incorporating throughout 23. So you see increased canine service, as well as CPD hours. Contractual services, again, impacted by larger inflation, impacts, as well as the Venture 3 rollout are increasing. And then with regard to our debt service, you see an increase here with regard to debt associated with our TIFIA loans. And again, that is in conjunction with some of the historic levels of discretionary grant funding that we've received and the local match that we require for some of those projects as well. On the next slide, you see some bar charts here for 24, 5, and 6. And I'll focus you on the left column for each of the two column sets. You see there in pink, the federal relief funding going to close the gap in 2024 of $473 million. There in the middle set of columns, you see 2025 plan. And again, we expect to cover the majority of the gap with the remaining federal relief funds, but we are projecting a gap of about $50 million that will not be covered by the remaining federal emergency relief funds. And then in 2026, you see the full impact of the fiscal cliff, where we're expecting a gap of about $577 million. And again, that's the real focus here as we continue conversations with the state with regard to potential funding for the fiscal cliff issues that we're facing. On the next slide, as Dorval had highlighted in his opening remarks, we've done some tremendous things with regard to, helping ourselves, so to speak. In the conversations that we have with state legislature, they're always interested in what we're doing to help ourselves. And we've done a tremendous job over the last 8 years. Since 2015, we have over $1 billion of cost savings and non-fare box revenue. And again, this is, kind of best in class kind of across the peer group with regard to the measures that we've been able to effectuate. And I think that it's really important to understand that what we've been able to do is quite tremendous, but more importantly, it has not impacted frontline positions. It does not impact service, and it does not impact safety. So again, we've been able to tighten our belts with regard to some of our labor costs. We've also undertaken, again, as I mentioned, the effective strategy of locking in at very attractive prices with regard to our fuel purchases and power and natural gas. We also continue to make selective, investments in our capital. Again, continuing to invest in our rolling stock and other things to help bend that cost curve and make it more efficient for us to deliver that service. And then, again, one of the things that was a real kind of feather in our cap, particularly pre-pandemic, and we're starting to see some of these revenues coming back, is some of the non-fare box revenues that we've been able to create. We were really aggressive with regard to rolling out of our advertising platform, parking concessions. And then we did receive for a period of time the innovative ground transportation tax from the city. Again, we're starting to see these revenues coming back, from advertising, concessions, and parking as the ridership comes back. But again, these were kind of best in class again with regard to innovation on non-fare box revenues. On the next slide, you see some of the ridership trends, both pre-pandemic and then the impact of the pandemic. But I'd really like to focus you on what we've seen here recently. In 2022, we saw a 24% increase in ridership. I think that a lot of times, the press kind of gets a hold of, where are we vis-a-vis 2019? And obviously we all want to get back to there and better than that position. But we have had tremendous growth coming back into the system, which is again, why we have to get the service back up to the levels that our customers, demand. You see here 24% growth in 2022. You see 23 and 23, we see about a 12% growth. And then we're expecting, anywhere between 4.5% and almost 6% growth for the outer years. So again, we have a lot more room to continue to grow. And again, I think we're well positioned to continue to hire and get that service out there to continue to pick up the additional ridership. And then I'll turn it over to Michelle to walk through the capital program.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good morning. I'm Michelle Curran, Deputy CFO and Comptroller for CTA. Next slide, please. The 2024 to 2028 CIP is a $3.61 billion program that funds major projects, including the Red Line Extension, the All Stations Accessibility Program, conversion to an electric bus fleet, and bus and rail fleet modernization. The funding sources for the CIP include federal funds, state PAYGO funds from motor fuel tax revenues, and CTA bonds. We'll also continue to seek additional FTA discretionary grant funding awards as they become available, particularly to accelerate the ASAP and eBus or bus electrification programs. Next slide, please. So the next several slides here include some of the details around specific projects in the CIP. First is the Red Line Extension to the south, which is an estimated cost of $3.6 billion. The Red Line Extension would extend the rail lines the rail line 5.6 miles from the 95th Street Terminal to 130th Street, including 4 new stations, park and ride facilities, and a storage yard and maintenance facility. We're currently in the project engineering phase of the federal New Starts funding program and expect the full funding grant agreement to be awarded in late 2024. The CIP funds $700 million for the project until all funding is secured when the FFGA is executed. The project continues to move forward with community engagement, agency coordination, and technical analysis. Property acquisition is moving forward, and the RLE Transit Supportive Development Plan was approved by the City's Plan Commission earlier this year. In addition, 3 qualified contracting teams are expected to submit design build proposals. Next slide, please. The All Stations Accessibility Program, or ASAP, is a comprehensive 20-year program to make all stations vertically accessible. 103 of CTA's 145 rail stations, or 70%, are already accessible. Currently, CTA has funding identified for 14 of the remaining 42 stations. Phase 1 of the plan, which is fully funded, includes 9 stations to be made fully accessible, including the 4 Red Line stations as part of the Red Purple Modernization Project, the Austin Green Line Station, California, Montrose, and Racine stations on the Blue Line, and the State and Lake Elevated Station. In addition, funding has been identified for 5 stations included in Phase 2, which are Irving Park, Belmont, and Pulaski on the Blue Line, and Oak Park and Ridgeland on the Green Line. With the completion of these additional stations, the rail system will be 81% accessible. The program also includes upgrades or replacements to existing elevators. Next slide, please. The CIP includes funding of $345 million for the conversion to electric buses. This will complete the funding need to modernize the Chicago Avenue garage for e-buses and begin funding for upgrades to the 103rd Street garage. It also funds 188 million towards the next e-bus purchase and for additional chargers. As always, CTA continues to seek additional discretionary federal grant funds for bus garage improvements for e-buses and for the purchase of additional e-buses. Next slide, please. The CIP also invests in the bus and rail fleet modernization. Bus improvements include purchasing the remaining new standard buses, providing for new e-buses and to perform overhauls on existing buses. On the rail side, we've funded the purchase of the new 7000 series rail cars and overhaul work for the existing rail cars. We're also investing in utility vehicles and equipment to help maintain the rail cars. This concludes our presentation, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you all very, very much. Questions or comments from the board? Yes, Director Holt.
Good morning, y'all. I have two questions. One's just a math question, if you don't mind indulging me. And then the second, I want to talk a little bit about ridership trends. With the FY23 forecast, I don't understand, or maybe you could explain to me how we've got a reflected surplus, but yet we're still filling part of the shortfall with the federal funds. Wouldn't the increase in revenue and decrease in expenses just simply decrease the amount of federal funds that are necessary to fill the gap?
Exactly. We had originally estimated close to $400 million.
So where's the 34 come from then? Wouldn't that also just further reduce the use of federal funds? Or I'm sorry, the 75.
So the 75 is incorporated in reducing, because originally our estimate for the use of federal funds for 23 was about 390 million. And then when you factor out the 75 kind of positive performance that we've had, we've been able to reduce that down to about 315 million. And then that's allowing us to kind of get further into 2025.
As I said, math question. Thank you.
Yeah.
The second question I had was, could you all talk a little bit more about your projections and assumptions around ridership trends, and what are you seeing and how are you thinking about that to get to this, to the growth that you're projecting over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I think and if you want more detail, I can have Mike Connolly come up and talk about it. But I think what we're seeing in ridership trends is really reflective of the fact that people are starting to use public transportation again. They're just not necessarily using it to go to and from work. And we're seeing pre-pandemic levels of ridership for special events, for other activities that the city has. And as the city has continued to expand and grow those activities, they have obviously provided opportunities for CTA to have good ridership days. I point specifically to the example of the Taylor Swift concerts, which got national attention not only because of the fact that Swifties are manic about their artists, but that they were riding transit and creating transit huge inflows wherever she appeared. But that's, while that got a lot of attention, we've been seeing that pattern play out for all the events we've been doing over the course of the year. One of the things that has led to is where are the opportunities going forward? And one of the things that we have really focused on is that we believe the real opportunities for growth are going to be on the bus side of our house. One, because our transit system is basically a spoke system that only goes in and out of Central Business District. And while we have great geographic coverage for the rail system, it's our bus system that's sort of like the heavy load of opportunity, and it's also the part of my service that I have the most flexibility around. And so a couple of things that we're going to be doing over the course of the next year is, one, in conjunction with our partner at CDOT, we're going to be doing a Better Street for Bus program. It's going to really be looking at how do we better expand and take advantage of bus priority zones, signal prioritization, other things to help speed up our bus service and make it much more competitive. And then we're also going to be launching late this year, going into next year, the public participation phase of our bus vision study, which is really the opportunity for us to take a look at our entire bus system, looking at new travel patterns, new locations within the city, and looking to see how we start to reimagine our bus system to better reflect what we know the travel patterns are going to be going forward. So what we do know is that we're not going to continue to operate this system exactly the way we have in the past. and assume that the ridership is going to continue to grow. We have to adjust our services to reflect what we know the ridership wants to do. And we're blessed, in my opinion, with one of the most robust public transportation systems in the region. And that gives us the ability to adjust that service to reflect what we think are going to be the travel patterns in the future.
Yes, Director Lewis, good morning.
Morning, thank you. Well, I had two questions, but now you said something makes me have three.
Okay.
The
That's usually
bonus-
not my intent, but
My bonus question is, when you have opportunities like the Swifties, is there a differential pricing element that goes in there opportunistically? Are you able to get more for a bus ride than you would in normal circumstances?
you know, it depends on where they're going or where they're coming to. While the Swifties may ultimately provide a great boost in ridership, I have to recognize the fact that I still have regular customers who are riding the system at the same time. I think what we are going to be looking at and are looking to try to find more opportunity to do is what I would call more joint promotional opportunities, working with like the organizers of the concerts and really seeing how we can incorporate, for example, a free CTA ride as part of your ticket. When I've visited other transit systems around the world, you see a lot of that activity because they don't have the ability for people to go up to a venue and park their cars. So there's a lot more incorporation into the price of the tickets themselves, the public transportation option. That's something I think we have a lot of opportunity to pursue. And I know Jeremy and his team are going to be working to see where we can develop those relationships more. As we go into NASCAR season, for example, I'm really looking forward to trying to find a way to leverage the NASCAR event in Chicago next year with some sort of direct connection to public transit that will really help support. And I should point out, not just CTA, but also Metro and Pace in terms of the people who will come to these events and want to basically be a part of the action in the city of Chicago.
Thank you. Now the two questions that I was going to ask before you prompted me. One is that the workforce issue. Are you doing things? What special things I should say? Because everybody's lamenting about the fact that it's really difficult to hire qualified staff. People don't want to work. Yet, I think in the report you gave a robust, or you all gave a robust outlook on being able to bring the workforce on side. So, just interested in some of the background things in terms of what you're doing and what success you're having, because maybe it's something that could be spread across the other transit agencies.
Well, you know, in that regard, all of us are talking to each other, and APTA in particular has done a really great job of putting together material of best practices and other strategies in terms of how we not only hire individuals, but also how we retain them going forward, because that's the other part of the equation here. It's not just getting them in the door; it's keeping them. And so in CTA's case, we've done a number of things. One, we've been very aggressive in promoting and holding hiring fairs to basically create what we refer to as one-stop shop opportunities for people to come in and basically get processed through, I'd say, 80% of the requirements while you're there in our facility. It's been a very successful program. We've had huge attendance participate in them. We do at least one a month, and that has really helped us, particularly on the bus side, get our numbers up. We had a goal this year of hiring 700 bus operators by the end of the year. We've already blown through that goal, and we anticipate hiring somewhere around the number of 1,000 by the end of the year. Which is a tremendous accomplishment and one that's really been the result of the work that we've done in our hiring and our job fair activities. We also have created hiring bonuses for our new employees. We've eliminated the use of part-time work for entry-level employees so that you come on full-time at CTA. What that has meant is a dramatic improvement in the quality of life for our new employees. They aren't facing the variables of schedules that change every single day as part-timers did. We have, continued to obviously work very closely with the union to identify opportunities to support our employees once they're on board. And we've also really taken a very hard look at our entire hiring process from start to finish. We have used technology to streamline that process. We have used a lot of innovation to reduce the amount of time that it takes to get a person from the moment they come in the door to the moment that they begin their training as a full-time employee at CTA. And I think as a result of that, we've seen a lot of improvement and not only getting people interested in it, but not losing them in the hiring process as well. A lot of these are techniques that we've also seen other transit agencies use. A lot of them were things that we brought in terms of innovation. A lot of it is work that we're going to continue to do going forward because we're not done yet. But I think that one of the benefits of the pandemic is that it really did require us to sort of rethink how we were hiring, because at least in the middle of the pandemic, you couldn't do the things the way we had always done them. And that has generated some very innovative approaches that I think have been very helpful and supportive of the work that we're trying to do.
Thank you. My third and final question is Chicago is a sanctuary city. Illinois, the state of Illinois is a sanctuary state. There have been demands put on the CTA relative to warming and so forth. And I know when Jeremy went through the projections for next year, there wasn't any line item relative to that. How are those costs being handled? Is there a number that you anticipate, and how is that being funded? Is it being funded out of the surplus, or how? What's the thinking there?
So first of all, let me sort of give you a sense of how we're supporting the migrant situation right now. As you indicated, we're providing warming buses. We're only providing 21 buses, and those buses are only overnight, so they're not all day long. And the city is obviously working on a plan to transition the migrants to more suitable housing by the time that the weather really starts to turn cold, as we know it will do here in our city. So it has not been a huge financial burden, or it hasn't been an operational burden at all. These are times when we have extra buses because we aren't running as much service. It has not impacted our daily service levels in terms of the buses that we have provided. We are capturing all the costs associated with the warming buses, as well as some of the costs that we had very early on when we were doing some initial transport of migrants when they were first starting to come into the city. And we are hopeful that we will get reimbursed for those costs at some point in time if the city and the state and the county work towards both adding additional funding and also working with the federal government to get the financial resources associated with that. But from a budgetary standpoint, it's really a minimal cost to us, what we're doing at this point in time. And there hasn't been any increase in that ask or request by the city at this point.
Thanks, Director Lewis. Director Gorman, or not Gorman, Gorman. Elizabeth.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, President Carter, Jeremy and Michelle for your presentation. My first question has to do along the lines of the vacancy factor. In Cook County, when we did budgets, we referred to our unfilled positions, and our factor is a turnover adjustment. I believe the CTA uses a salvation factor. I'm just curious if that's correct, if I'm, on the right path with the salvage factor. How many unfilled positions, and what would that factor be?
So we do have a salvage target by each department. It's based on the vacancy rate that we expect throughout the year. With regard, that does not include STO positions or service positions, because our service positions are based on hours. And so it's the number of people that you need to fill that level of service. Our budget is based on 2019 service levels. So we and we're working to get back up to that level. So we don't have a vacancy rate for scheduled transit operations, only for the non-STO positions.
So there's not like a set number. It's just strictly hours as opposed to positions.
For service related, for bus operators, rail operators, customer service assistants, yes, the budget is built based on service hours.
How many hours then? That'd be probably a significant amount of hours.
It's in the millions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's just a factor. It's just a calculation between the hours and how many hours an employee can work in a year, the expected number of hours an employee works during the year, and that is our full-time equivalent positions. And that's what's outlined in the budget book.
Okay. Would it make more sense to have positions as opposed to hours, or is that's just how you guys have always basically rolled it out?
Employees pick hours. So you know, some employees have different, you know, you may pick a 38-hour schedule or 40-hour schedule, so it needs to be based on hours.
Okay, thank you for that. And then my next question has to do with fare integration and how CTA is integrating with Metra and Pace, and how is that looking for the upcoming year?
Well, we're continuing it for the upcoming year, but I think what we really focused on is particularly between PACE and CTA, our monthly pass products, and how we align them, not only lowered their costs, but also aligned them with each other in a direct way. The other thing that we did is we modified the Metro Link Up Pass. We increased the number of hours that it could be used, and we also reduced the cost of that Link Up Pass, which allows people to basically transfer from Metro to CTA. The other thing that we did is we eliminated the cost for transfers, which is something that not only works within CTA, but also as it relates to our interaction with PACE. And then we're working with PACE right now in terms of how we ultimately adjust our service in a way that allows people with disabilities who are eligible for paratransit services to ride our system for free. So it's a way to encourage people to off of paratransit and onto our mainline service, which is ultimately the objective of ADA. And ultimately the benefit of having such a robust bus system between both PACE and CTA, along with, as you heard, a growing accessible rail system that allows people to use it. So all of those things have been part of an overall strategy, and we continue to meet regularly with our partners at PACE and Metro to find more ways to integrate and improve that. I think if there's any silver lining that's come out of the pandemic, I think it's been a recognition of the fact that as a region, we all have to work together to really create the ridership levels that we need to achieve the regional goals, one. And two, when you have a lot of extra money, you can afford to do things that you couldn't afford to do beforehand. There's been a lot of clamoring in the past, as all of you have known, about why aren't we doing more coordination between our fares and other things? Well, one of the reasons was that we have a funding, structure in place that really disincentivizes that type of integration and support. I know that's a big part of the bigger conversation that we're having going forward. And I really do believe that the ability to coordinate, collaborate, and integrate is much more of a funding problem than it is a governance problem. And if we do this the right way, and if we create the level of funding that actually supports our entire system in a fair and equitable way, I think you have the ability to work together to support the general broader regional goals that RTA talks about all the time, and that, quite honestly, CTA, Metro, and PACE talk about all the time. And I'm looking forward to that conversation as we move forward next year.
Great. If you don't mind, one more question, and that's along the lines, you ended up the presentation with how, investing in electric buses and whatnot and making that transition. So I know I always asked this question, how soon, it'll be, electric, and then Jeremy mentioned about locking in for the diesel, and whatnot. And I'm also curious, I mean, if just to layer on, if biodiesel is being considered as you guys transition into the electric fleet.
Okay, you just asked a question I don't know the answer to. I don't know about biodiesel. I haven't heard that being discussed with me. I know that obviously in terms of the fuel that Jeremy locks in, from a budgetary standpoint, it's been the traditional low emission fuel, clean fuel,
Right.
that we use for our diesel buses. We're obviously very committed to the transition to a zero emission bus fleet. We're committed to the electrification of our fleet. It is a very complicated process for a system of our size, because as you heard, that not only involves buying the vehicles, but it also involves converting the garages to support it and putting in the charging technology necessary throughout the city to allow us to run, because we run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So coordinating that and making sure we do it in the appropriate way and timing all the things that we need to do to allow that to happen so that when the vehicles arrive, they can actually be used. It's a very complicated process that involves not only my planning department and my bus operations department, but also my infrastructure department to make it all work. We are working in a coordinated fashion to do that. There's some bigger industry challenges that are occurring right now in the bus industry that I'm actually chairing national task force to really help support, to make sure that the bus manufacturing industry is actually there to give us the capacity to support the orders that we're going to need going forward. And certainly we have a transitional plan that moves us away from purchasing diesel buses to purchasing only zero emission buses, pretty much in line with what the state legislation has mandated that we do going forward. I would also point out that we're not the only state that has made these mandates on transit systems. States all over the country are doing very similar mandates and basically expecting all the transit systems to start to address this issue. And so I think, figuring out how we're all going to do that, and more importantly, figuring out that there's capacity to actually meet all of our demands for orders has become a critical path issue for the successful implementation of all the work that we're doing. And I just want you to know that I'm actually very deeply involved in that conversation to make sure that we do have the capacity to meet our needs going forward.
Right. I mean, it is just a much bigger issue. Like, as you mentioned, it's just purchasing electric vehicles. It's the whole infrastructure you got to put in place and, just kind of trickles, out, impacting your budget, which I totally understand, but thank you for that.
And
appreciate
I'll
your
get you the
information.
answer on the biodiesel question. I just don't know.
No,
off the top of
it,
my
it
head.
just kind of makes sense because it's nothing that you can just snap your finger and say, oh, we're gonna go from diesel to electric, and if there's a transition, with the biodiesel.
Yeah, well, it's certainly, even the diesel buses that we're buying today are much cleaner than the diesel buses that they're replacing. And I do like to make the broader point that I think is always important for our environmental climate friends to remember, which is public transportation as an activity is a cleaner approach to dealing with our issues than single occupancy vehicles. So even when I'm running a diesel bus, I'm still taking a lot of cars off the street. That ultimately is a plus for our environment. So it just making that one broader plug as we continue this conversation.
All right. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Director Carey.
I have a couple questions. The first one kind of tacks on to one of Director Holt's questions about the expenses coming in significantly lower than anticipated for not just last year, but the year before. So I understand that reduces the amount of the federal funds you need to draw down. But I'm curious, what's your confidence level that your projected expenses for 24, that you'll be closer to that than you have been over the last couple of years?
So again, what we've seen with regard to our expenses is that we've seen positive variance on the labor line and then some of the other lines as well. The labor line is a factor of vacancies, and we continue to ramp up our efforts to hire. So again, we're assuming that in the budget that we're getting back to 2019 service levels. So I don't know if again, what we hope is we hire those people as quickly as possible. It does take a little bit of time to get people hired and trained up and out onto the front line. But there'll be some positive variance, at least for the first couple of months there, as just the hiring efforts continue to move forward. With regard to fuel and other expenses, we do take into consideration, inflationary impacts kind of across the board. So that is factored in to some degree. But, again, I think there's a lot of unknowns in the market right now with regard to, where inflation is going to eventually settle. Other, impacts, we've seen obviously over the last couple of years, significant impacts in supply chain and how that's impacting costs and things like that. So, again, I think that we've done a very good job over the years of being, conservative in our estimates. But I guess there's still a lot of unknowns on the table.
One of the biggest unknowns that Jeremy did mention that, of course, we are obviously planning for is a new collective bargaining agreement. My current one expires at the end of this year. The union has already requested that we open negotiations around that. I don't know yet, obviously, what that's going to look like. As you have seen from the slide that Jeremy presented to you around our cost savings, we've had a pretty good record in our negotiations of, one, while giving out generous wage increases, also balancing that to some degree with improved efficiencies that we can get out of our workforce. I think this negotiation is going to be a very interesting one because of all the other dynamics that are in play within the industry as a whole, and the need to really be looking at how we conduct our business to reflect the reality of what we know we're dealing with here today, as opposed to what we were dealing with in a pre-pandemic environment. And the union understands, that union leadership that I meet with regularly certainly appreciates the fact that we have to find a way to continue to keep CTA strong financially and ultimately continuing to grow in terms of our ridership. And they recognize that may mean we need to look at things a little bit differently than we have in the past. So there's both a lot of opportunity there, but there's also obviously a lot of financial impact that we have to obviously be prepared to deal with next year.
Okay, thank you. Two more questions. One of the expenses that's increasing is the contractual, and you mentioned the Ventra upgrade. Can you talk about that a little bit more? The Ventra upgrade, are those some of that one-time costs, and are they ongoing?
Yes, it's a little bit of both. And again, I think that this is an important increase in investment in the system. One, we have to upgrade the back end just because it's, kind of at the end of its useful life at this point. The other is integrating some very important kind of new functionality into the platform to allow us to better integrate again, across the 3 service boards, but also with third-party providers as well. And again, I think with what we're moving forward on with regard to open API structure, that will allow more plug and play, in which at the end of the day becomes better functionality for our customers, ensuring that they can get more real-time information, that they can get better integration within their journey. And again, just providing a better quality product out there. So yes, it does include some capital type costs as well as some ongoing costs as well.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just going to amplify a little bit what Jeremy said. The venture system that we have in place right now was the first generation of the technology that we're using.
When was it first put in?
Oh gosh, it's been like, 2015. It was before I joined CTA. But we were sort of like the cutting edge of implementing this new system at CTA, and in some ways we're the guinea pig for what got used throughout the rest of the country. They have now really upgraded and created a newer generation, or Ventra 3.0, whatever you want to call it, that is sort of like the new standard for this fair media system. It is a system that's being implemented in New York right now and in Washington, D.C. It's a natural progression for what we need to do. And as Jeremy pointed out, there's some capital costs. You're going to see new modules for tapping your card and your phone or whatever, and other things that come with that. But also with that comes new functionality that will allow us to really pursue our ultimate goal, which is become a mobility integrator through our Ventra app that would allow you to not only use Ventra, but to use Divvy Bike, Uber, Lyft, car shares and everything like that. That's sort of my broader vision of what I want to do with this. That makes us more of a mobility implementer, even if we're not providing all the services that necessarily fall under it.
Right. No, that sounds good. And my last question, you're issuing a bond, 467 million, and you're deferring principal payments till 2046. What's the thinking on that? That would seem to be
So
more expensive.
Yes. So the good question with regard to the debt borrowings, I think just to kind of level set with regard to debt borrowings that we've had to do over the course of time, I think it's important to kind of go back and understand kind of the level of funding that we've received for capital kind of across the board, from the state. And I think that unfortunately it hasn't been consistent enough or in full amount enough to kind of fully, kind of incorporate the state of good repair needs that we have, as well as, new projects that we want to undertake as well. So that has resulted in CTA, continuing to have to invest in a 100-plus-year-old system. And that has resulted in us having to borrow, several $billion again, because of the fact that we've had essentially 5 years on, 5 years off, 5 years on, 5 years off from the state. And also the amount that we receive essentially kind of on an annual basis, albeit kind of bucketed up when they do their bond deals, has essentially been kind of the same over the course of that time. So again, I think that, again, we would not want to have to borrow if we didn't have to. But again, we have to continue to make investments in the system. And that's what you're seeing through this bond deal. And, because of the fact that we've borrowed, again, kind of going back to 2008, in addition to the capital borrowings, we also had pension obligation borrowing to help close the gaps that we had in the pension liabilities that were outstanding for CTA. That had created kind of like a level debt service structure. As we have done over the course of the last several bond deals, we've essentially done a wraparound structure so that the principal is deferred and so that we're not increasing the impact in the near term, as much with the pay down of principal. That is in the current market, in the prior market a couple years ago, was obviously a very, very successful strategy because of the historically low interest rates. While interest rates have gone up over the course of the last year and a half or so, we're still at relatively attractive rates, if you look at it historically. So again, I think that what we'll continue to look at is what the current interest rate environment is whenever we go to issue bonds, and we'll, attack it appropriately with regard to how the structure of that bond deal is incorporated into the current structure of our debt profile. But again, I think that we would obviously prefer not to have to borrow, but just the needs and the necessity of the system are such that we do, and we try to make the overall debt service profile as attractive as possible in taking into consideration the resources that we have either on the operating side or the capital side to help offset those debt service payments.
Okay, so if I understand, and I understand the argument for borrowing, given lack of funding, it's just a question of deferring the principal payments, which ends up costing more in the long run. And you're doing that to keep your, the amount of money you're spending on debt service at a certain level related to overall capital.
Correct. And again, we're obviously primarily focused on, the next, 10, 15 years of what that debt service profile looks like at its maximum annual debt service levels, in looking at the overall resources that we have with regard to utilizing those for debt service payments. And again, I think that it goes back to the larger conversation about overall funding and what kind of funding that we have.
Right.
And, obviously we could structure debt differently if we had more resources at our disposal.
Right. No, totally understood. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, Director. Director Ross.
I have a couple of capital questions. In the summary that we were provided, it indicates that you're purchasing two different kinds of electric buses. Can you tell us what the difference is in those in terms of function or inventory?
I don't believe we're buying two different kinds of electric buses. There is no real functional difference between any of the electric bus models that are out right now. They may have some minor changes in their charging systems and things of that nature, but in terms of how they interact with our infrastructure and everything like that, they would be identical.
Okay.
Right now, the order that we're purchasing is Proterra. If you're familiar with Proterra, they've been going through some financial challenges right now, but we've certainly been in discussions with them to make sure they're going to maintain their commitment to under our contract to provide the buses that we have ordered. But no, there really is no significant difference in the buses that we're ordering at this point.
Okay. And my second question is, now that you have some electric buses actually on the street, have you encountered any unanticipated problems with their operations that would give you pause for continuing to make those purchases?
Well, before we really sort of dove into purchasing electric buses, we had a few electric buses working in our system for quite some time. And we ran them in the wintertime, we ran them in the summertime. We got a good sense of what their capacity is. And obviously the technology around the batteries in particular is evolving very rapidly, as we see even on the private sector with electric cars and things of that nature. The challenge, as it has always been, has really just been, runtime between charging. And obviously the amount of time it takes to charge when you do that. And that obviously impacts our scheduling of our service and impacts the routing of the vehicles and things of that nature. As we start to expand our electric fleet, we are obviously being very cognizant of how those issues will impact not only the way we provide our service, but the cost of that service. Based on the analysis that we've done, we still believe that we're in a cost positive framework around converting to electric bus fleet over the diesel fuel bus fleet as we go forward. But I don't know that there's anything at this point that we've seen with our purchase of these vehicles that was not unanticipated or a part of the profile that we went into. Obviously, we're purchasing buses from a manufacturer who we had never bought buses from before. And with any new manufacturer, there are always little quirks that you have to learn about their buses. But I don't view that as being unusual or any way out of step with what I would do with any, diesel bus that I would buy if it were a new bus type for us.
And my final question is, I've been seeing on television an ad for Uber where they talk about providing services for riders with special needs, and in particular one where the lady is sight impaired. Will your alert systems, I assume they're doing that through some kind of an audible cue, since obviously she can't look at her phone and know what's happening. Will you be able to provide that kind of information for bus riders as you try to attract them to fixed routes?
Yeah, one of the things that we're really focused on is how to make our system more available to people with disabilities, be it sight or other physical impairments. And yes, we are looking at and we are adding infrastructure to support that. We're putting Braille signage on all of our bus stop signs now to allow people to better understand where the bus stop is. There's a lot of street furniture at a sidewalk, and sometimes it's not clear if you're visually impaired where you're supposed to stand to catch the bus. But there's also a lot of new technology that's coming out now that allows people with visual disabilities to navigate through complicated stations like Clark Lake and others, and we're looking at all of that, along with the upgrades that we would make to our app to make it much more friendly for people with disabilities to utilize to access our service.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Thank you. Yes, Director Gorman.
I'm sorry if I was just kind of waiting for, see if there's anything else because I already had my opportunity to speak, but just a quick question. For the DB Eagle, to build out upon the capital contracts, what's a DB Eagle and how has it been actually realized, within the budget or within the contracts?
Yeah, our DBE goal is a goal that we establish over a certain period of time. I believe right now it's 28% is the goal. We actually view that as the floor, not the ceiling. And it doesn't capture what are considered non-race conscious activities that we engage in. So the goal is really for race conscious work where we set specific goals on contracts. But there's a lot that we're doing in terms of mentor protege programs, building small businesses programs, financial capacity programs that are all intended to increase the level and amount of DBE participation on our projects. There's also a lot of work that we're doing in terms of breaking up contracts and redefining scope of work to allow us to have DBEs compete as primes at CTA, which is a primary goal of mine personally, as part of the effort to really make sure that we're creating a bigger level of visibility for DBEs and getting them the experience of working with CTA directly. And then finally, we're doing a lot of education with small businesses in particular to make sure they understand what it takes to take on a contract with a public agency and putting them in a position so that when they do get business from us, they are more likely to succeed than to fail, which is something that has always been a big concern of mine and of our industry, that we're really making sure that we're providing them with those opportunities. And then one final point that I would make to just sort of reemphasize my personal commitment to this. There is a program called the Equity Infrastructure Project, which is basically a national program that's designed to really look at creating generational wealth in low income and minority communities, that is focused on how do you improve the DBE programs to really create those opportunities for small businesses to grow into successful big businesses that are competing for work at agencies like CTA. I am the national co-chair of that activity, and I'm committed on a national scale to not only promote the work that we're doing here at CTA, but also to see that as an industry, we're really creating the opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses and other historically underutilized businesses to grow and to get advantage of what has been a historic level of funding on the capital side for federal infrastructure investments that should be distributed in a way that everyone benefits from it.
Thank you.
Carrie.
I just thought of something else, and perhaps you talked about this with fair immigration and I missed it. I apologize. Is there a commitment? Are you working towards a regional one-day pass that could be used across, all 3 service bureaus?
There is a lot of discussion around that. Like I said, the book isn't closed on where and how we can integrate our fares. The point, I didn't speak specifically to that, but the broader point that I made around regional one-day passes or other things that we may be working on is the broader funding conversation that we're having for the region, and really looking to see how we're subsidized at a level where, CTA doesn't lose its shirt in a one-day pass, nor does Metro, nor does PACE. I think that opportunity exists. I think that there's a mutual desire on the part of the leadership of both CTA, Metro, and PACE to find ways to better integrate our services and allow our customers to get the benefit of, quite honestly, one of the most robust transportation systems in the country. And one way to do that is by making it easier for people to move between our various systems going forward.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorval, and to your staff. We had a great visit down at the 95th Street Station a couple of weeks ago, where we looked and we're updated by the CTA on the Red Line Extension South. And Melinda Betzger, thank you for providing your first electric bus, and to Jim Derwinski and Metro staff, because we took her bus from the 95th station around to see great improvements to the Metro South suburban operations. So we're all in this together. My comment, just one of them, is, as the chairman of the RTA, I bet you most of my questions always come, Dorval, on crime and cleanliness. Ghost buses are on there, but it's crime and cleanliness. I applaud your extra efforts on cleanliness. I know you have your new program going. Canines. So how many canine, double canine, the canine units that are out there, what's that contract cost and how many are there?
Yeah, I can get you that detail. I don't have it off the top of my head. You're correct to recognize that we've increased the cost of that particular activity on CTA, and have increased the number of K9 units that we're utilizing, along with unarmed security guards, which is another piece of it. But I think the broader point that I would make is that the K9s and the security guards are really supplements to the police department. The Chicago Police Department carries the bulk of the safety and security responsibilities at CTA, but we obviously work very closely with the city of Chicago, as well as surrounding suburb police departments, to really support our efforts in that regard. And I think when we talk to our customers, what they want to see are uniformed police officers. And, the security guards are nice and they can be helpful at times, but we recognize that that's not the salvation to the perception of safety on CTA. I do like to point out that CTA is very safe. Having said that, anybody who's been a victim of a crime anywhere, whether it's on CTA or in the city or anywhere else, feel like there needs to be more security to keep us safe. And so I understand our customers, concerns around that guard, and we're going to continue to work to do everything that we can to make them as safe as possible in a city like Chicago as we move forward.
And anything that we can do, I can do either with the mayor or Superintendent Snelling with respect to uniformed police. And obviously they have their own challenges in hiring.
Yeah.
on
Ironic, isn't it?
on Police force. But anything we can do to help there would be appreciated. I know New York has several thousand dedicated New York police officers to their system. So will you get me the information?
I will.
Because I use it when I talk to people saying, look, we have 2-person canine teams. The CTA is actually expending your resources to doing things that really are the responsibility of the Chicago Police Department. And it's sensitive and we're working on it. But
Yeah, I'm happy to get you that information. And I would point out that the new superintendent, before he became superintendent, was actually the commander who was over the public transit unit of CPD. And so he is very familiar with the challenges that we're dealing with. I've already had some very good conversations with him about the need for additional support on CTA, and he certainly understands that. So I'm very optimistic that as the police department deals with their challenges, that CTA will be a part of their strategy to ensure that the citizens of the city are safe and well protected.
good. Anything we can do to back you up, just let us know. Anything else? Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you. And
A lot more
before I-
complicated than the public knows.
I
to
agree.
operate in
Before I step
CTA.
down, I just want to say how much CTA appreciates the work of this board and the advocacy that you've done on our behalf. I think Leanne and her team, as well as all of you, have been an integral part of the conversation that we're having about how we really fix the funding in this region. And I truly do believe that if we can fix this funding problem, the opportunities that we have as a region to continue to grow and continue to improve our transit services will be beyond anything we ever imagined. And I'm really looking forward to being a part of that vision and working with all of you collaboratively to find a way to make that happen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Melinda, you've been patiently waiting back there. Come on up with your team and you can introduce them. Yes, ma'am. All yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Director Rudden. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today to present PACE's 2024 budget. Here with me today is PACE's Chief Financial Officer and Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Officer, Lori Newson, who you may know since we stole her from the RTA. And also Department Manager of Budget, Melanie Castle. As we plan for the year ahead, PACE is poised to reimagine our transit system in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. We're pleased to present PACE's balanced budget, which builds upon a remarkable year filled with historic infrastructure investments, innovative service launches, and thoughtful efforts to continue strong ridership growth. The profound changes brought about by the pandemic transform the way we do business, and our agency is uniquely positioned to adapt and meet our region's evolving mobility needs. Next slide, please. Thank you. In 2023, our agency implemented innovative and forward-thinking programs designed to meet the rapidly changing travel needs of our region in this post-pandemic world. PACE is innovating for the future and collaborating for success. Our capital program and strategic planning initiatives consist of projects designed to align with our mission to be a good steward of our environment and reduce our carbon footprint, to not only maintain a state of good repair, but to improve our customer experience by strengthening our infrastructure, and leverage innovation, technology, and alternative mobility options to further enhance regional connectivity. Next slide, please. Last year, I shared ambitious 2023 plans. Today, I'm pleased to report we've achieved what we set out to accomplish and more. I will start with our zero emission initiative. In 2023, we finalized our fleet transition plan, which lays the foundation for Project Zero. We incorporated our first electric bus into fixed route service, which proved to be invaluable to our staff as we were able to gain knowledge and experience on the vehicle's technology and operational characteristics. Staff was also able to use this vehicle for hands-on training of our operations and maintenance personnel. Charging infrastructure was installed at our Pace Southwest Division garage in Bridgeview, which will house our first electric bus and will be used on 95th Street starting this December. Just last month, the Pace board approved the purchase of our first electric paratransit vehicle, which we'll be seeing later on this year, actually. And we're working towards the implementation of an additional amenity for our riders with the installation of electric charging stations at several of our passenger facilities. In 2024, there will be many more exciting additions to our list of accomplishments related to Project Zero, including the anticipated delivery of 22 electric buses, placing our electric paratransit vehicle in service, the installation of additional charging stations at our passenger facilities, and I'm pleased to report that we'll break ground on the first phase of preparing North Division in Waukegan to operate a fully electric fleet. And most importantly, our agency will continue the pursuit of funding needed to implement a zero-emission fleet by 2040, which we all know will require significant investment. Next slide, please. Next, I'd like to highlight how our agency is putting funding to good use to strengthen our infrastructure and what we plan to focus on in the years ahead. In 2023, we broke ground on our Schaumburg ADA paratransit transfer facility. We upgraded our fare box equipment on our entire fleet. We broke ground on our South Campus, which will house our acceptance facility. We partnered with Metra to design our Harvey Transportation Center. We've installed real-time digital signs throughout the region. We implemented user-focused upgrades to our ADA paratransit technology. And we launched our Mobility as a Service trip planning platform, the Transit app, which centralizes Pace, Metra, and CTA connections and has already been upgraded and enhanced to integrate our on-demand service, Pace Connect service, and Van Go service, making trip planning for our riders much more convenient than ever. In 2024, we plan to move into the South Campus. We'll break ground on our Calumet City ADA transfer facility, and the Harvey Transportation Center projects will be ongoing. And staff will work on the integration of our ADA paratransit system into the Transit app. Next slide, please. This year, our agency made great strides to further enhance regional connectivity. I'm thrilled to report we launched the Pulse Dempster line. We increased flexible mobility options to address first mile, last mile connections with the expansion of our on-demand. The launch of Pace Connect, which leverages transportation network companies to expand service options for non-traditional commuters and riders by creating a late night ride-hailing service near O'Hare and in the Harvey area. And Van Go, which builds on our van pool program to allow single-day van reservations for commuters traveling between Metra and CTA transit centers to employment. We certainly have thought outside the bus to meet these challenging times for our transit operations, and our 2024 budget, coupled with our long-term strategic vision, will take us even farther in the years to come. In 2024, we'll launch the Rideshare Access Program, which will mirror the Taxi Access Program in the city of Chicago, to supplement suburban ADA paratransit services and offer an alternative mobility option leveraging transportation network companies such as Uber and Lyft, and we'll also offer free rides for certified ADA paratransit riders on our Pace fixed route buses. We look forward to revamping our network through our revitalization study called Revision. This project takes a deep, comprehensive look at our system and will assess how we can best improve service in our highest demand markets and develop innovative ways to serve suburban areas historically underserved by transit. And we will expand our on-demand services and will maintain our strong commitment to implementing faster, more frequent bus service by focusing on the development of additional pulse stations in the south suburbs, including on Halsted, Cermak, and 95th Street. Next slide, please. With all of the innovation and implementation of new and innovative services, it is important to address what our agency is focused on with respect to recruitment efforts and the operator shortage that is being experienced not only here in Chicago, but nationwide. I think you already heard a lot about that from Dorval Carter, but I just wanted to emphasize this is also in the top priority for PACE. We have partnered with 10 different community colleges where we'll offer free training to get your CDL. We'll pay to get your CDL, and that will lead you on your way to getting into the transit industry. We also do hire on the spot events every Thursday, except not next Thursday, which is Thanksgiving, but that's going to be a rarity. But every Thursday at our corporate offices in Arlington Heights, as well as in various locations in our garages. We will have people come to the garages and we'll do hire on the spot events there. We will continue our efforts in this regard into 2024. Now for the numbers. Sorry, next slide, please. Now for the numbers. Many of you already know PACE's Chief Financial Officer, but allow me to introduce her one more time, Lori Newsom, who will review the finer details of our 2024 budget with you. Lori.
Thank you, Melinda. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Before I get into the details of the budget, I would like to just briefly acknowledge PACE's federal DBE goal was set at 9%, and we were able to achieve 11.5%. And that basically equated to about $7.5 million that was spent with DBE firms. So we have certified this year so far about 20 additional DBE firms. And we continue our efforts to expand contracting opportunities for DBEs on our professional services and our construction contracts. So for example, we plan to offer more set-aside contracting opportunities to maximize the use of DBEs and SBEs as prime contractors. Next slide, please. So just going over a few budget highlights. Now looking at the 2024 budget proposal, the suburban service budget is estimated at $333.3 million, while the ADA budget is about $248.9 million. Our 2024 capital program totals about $118.5 million, and it includes the $55 million for the North Division electrification, and also the about $59 million for the expansion of the post 95th and post Halsted programs. We'll go back over that in a little bit more detail in the slides to come. Next slide, please. So for suburban service, the operating revenue is expected to finish 2023 $10 million above the budget. Approximately 1.4 million of the overperformance is farebox revenue from service. The total suburban service ridership is expected to finish the year at about 15 million, which is about 530,000 riders above the budget. Nearly $8 million of the overperformance is interest income. When the 2023 budget was developed this time last year, we expected that interest rates would decrease, but they have only increased since then. Expenses are estimated to finish the year approximately 8.5 million below budget. Most of the savings are associated with fuel and administrative expenses. Administrative expenses are expected to come in under budget due to the delays in some projects that were expected to start in 2023, but have been pushed back to 2024. Fuel consumption is right where we expected it to be for 2023. But the price per gallon for diesel is estimated to average about $3.07 compared to a budget of $3.57. Also, budget revenue and budget expenses have led to an $18.5 million decrease in the 2023 funding requirement. Public funding is estimated to finish 2023 at about 4.2 million above this year. The result is that we will need about 22.7 million less of the positive budget variance generated from the federal relief funding than we originally expected. Now, looking forward to 2024, we do expect total operating revenue to decrease. With the exception of interest income, all categories of revenue are expected to increase or stay flat. But it is not enough to offset the expected loss of interest income as we spend down the federal relief funding and interest rates eventually decreasing. The 2024 revenue budget continues to include the additional 15% local share credit for our demand response carriers. Farebox revenue is expected to increase by 3.2% in 2024, which is in line with the budgeted ridership increases. Operating expenses are expected to increase by 13% in 2024 before settling back closer to 4% in the outer years. The largest drivers of the increase is the largest drivers of the increases in 2024 are new service. Post-Dempster, with the associated decrease to local service, is expected to add about 4.1 million of expenses. We have received about a $15 million federal CMAQ grant to cover the cost of post-Dempster operations, which should take us nearly to the end of 2026. Other non-post service adjustments added another 6.7 million of expenses, which is a very good thing for our riders. Between 2023 and 2024, PACE is adding an annualized total of more than 200,000 revenue hours of service, focused on improving service and adding trips to existing routes. Other expense growth comes with the shift in administrative expenses from 2023 to 2024, as I previously mentioned. These are projects like new IT software implementations and some construction-related services that will be accommodated on the operating side of the budget in order to preserve funding for the capital projects. Decreasing revenue and increasing expenses will result in about a $41.8 million increase in the projected funding requirement from 2023 to 2024. Public funding is only expected to increase $10.8 million next year, of which $6.4 million is from sales tax and $4.4 million is from the federal sources. This will result in about a $59.7 million shortfall in funding available to funding required, which will be filled with the positive budget variance generated from the federal relief funding. The shortfall grows to $65.8 million in 2025 and $77.2 million in 2026, a total of $231.9 million across the planning horizon. There is only $205.5 million of the positive budget variance available to cover operating shortfalls. So we will exhaust our remaining federal relief funding partway through 2026. Next slide, please. So moving on to the ADA paratransit budget overview. For 2023, we expect ADA revenue to come in nearly at budget, less than 1% below, with overruns and interest income offsetting underruns and farebox revenue. The farebox revenue underrun is associated with moving back the TAP fare reinstatement from January 1st to mid-April. We wanted to do this to allow riders to prepare for the transition and not a result of underperformance in the ridership. Ridership is expected to come in in budget in 2023. For the 2023 operating expenses, they are expected to end the year less than 1% unfavorable to budget, which is essentially at budget. The slight underrun in revenue and the slight underrun in expenses will result in a total estimated shortfall of about $1.9 million for 2023, which will be drawn down from the ADA paratransit reserve if it's needed. For 2024, we expect revenue to increase by 3.7%, nearly $13 million. As with the Suburban Service, interest income is expected to decrease, but increases to the fare box revenue are high enough to offset the losses. Operating expenses are expected to increase by 3.6%, even though base ridership is expected to increase by 5%. This reflects an expected shift in riders from the vendor service to the user-directed taxi and TNC services, which are less expensive on a per-ride basis than the traditional vendor services. The funding requirement resulting for the 2024 estimated revenue and the expense is fully covered with the RTA sales tax and state funding for ADA paratransit. It is worth noting that the most recent state budget increases state funding for ADA paratransit from the historic $8.4 million to $9.1 million for 2024. PACE's 2024 capital budget. Oh, next slide. Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Okay. So moving on to the capital budget. Okay, so for the capital budget for 2024, we estimated it to be $118.4 million, and that includes replacement of 14 paratransit vehicles, approximately 200 onboard digital screens, North Division electrification expansion, post-95th construction, and post-Halsted design and construction. PACE's 5-year capital program totals $412.6 million, which will be funded with about $281 million for federal formula funds, about $83.6 million for state PAYGO funds, and $27.8 million for CMAQ funds, and $20 million for so we were awarded a raise grant. So the capital projects for 2024 through 2028 includes a total of 60 electric buses, 253 paratransit vehicles, approximately 900 onboard digital screens, and the Halsted and 95th post lines. The 5-year program also includes fully funding 3 garage electrification expansion projects at North, as Melinda mentioned earlier, Southwest, and the River Division, and advancing PACE's goal of transition to zero emissions. So this concludes my presentation, so I'll turn it over back to Melinda.
Thank you, Lori. Before we conclude our presentation, I just wanted to share my gratitude with the RTA board for all the efforts that you are making with transit is the answer, as well as my gratitude to my sister agencies, CTA and Metra. We work very well together. Rumors are not true. We do work very well together. And I agree with Dorval. The one reason we can work much better together is the fact that we all have enough funding for right now that we can try new things, experiment, and try and work together to get the job done. But there is much more funding needed for all of us. For us in the suburbs, the funding is needed for more frequent service, better service. Having our headways in the suburbs is not doing the job correctly. And we are filling in with using TNCs and doing some creative things with our on-demand and our van pool program, but there is more money needed for the system, as you all are well aware. I also wanted to thank my staff, who has done an excellent job this year, innovating, doing new things, trying new things, besides the budget staff who pulls it all together. But this year, we won the APTA Bus Safety Gold Award for our safety programs. And we also won the CMAP Regional Resilience Award in recognition of our Project Zero. So that concludes my report, and I thank you again for all your assistance and your collaboration with us.
Thank you, and welcome back, Lori. Questions of PACE, comments? Director Gathing, you have a question?
So I really appreciate the innovative efforts that you come up with. They're really interesting with the Van Gogh and stuff like that. I'm wondering what the public reception has been to the new offerings. And then a secondary question with the Pulse. Can you just explain what the difference is between Pulse and the other service. And then I noticed that there were programmed money for 2024, but nothing beyond that. So is it just that you haven't figured out other areas that you want to expand that, or is that the end of the program?
Okay, I'll try and answer them all.
Sorry,
I'm
I'm
gonna- That's
sorry.
okay. I'll start out with our innovative programs. The public's response has been very positive for several reasons. Number one, most of our programs are a little bit cheaper than riding transit. Why are we doing that? Because again, we don't have the capacity right now. We're working very diligently to get more drivers in the system. So for right now, we're trying to move people to other resources. So for example, our ADA paratransit can carry the people who absolutely have to use a bigger vehicle with a mobility device, lift in it. So customers like it. It frees up space on our equipment for other people who need it. And the third thing is it's less expensive for the operation. So it's very good. With regard to Pulse, Pulse is 15-minute service all day long from like 5 in the morning till 11 at night. It backs up a little bit, about 20 minutes after that. But it operates more, sorry, Metro, more like a train. It has limited stops. So you get from the beginning to the end of the service quicker. For example, Pulse, on Dempster, which we just started, operates from Evanston to O'Hare in 50 minutes. And how we can keep on track is we have signal priority. So our buses don't get stuck at a red light. They keep on going. We also continue to have local service for people who are going in between the stations. So we've reshifted our service around. So we have more quick service for people who are shooting through and then local service. The other thing that Pulse does is the stations are heated. The sidewalk is heated. So in the wintertime, when there's snow on the ground, that will melt. It has ice melt and it has real-time information. It has a big stanchion there, a vertical marker, which has real-time information as to when the next bus is coming. Did I answer all your questions?
The
All right,
last one was the funding post 2024. There was nothing in the capital program for that.
Okay, Pulse Dempster is complete now. We do have capital funding. We're starting. We might not have it all, but we're starting on Halsted right now, which we're very excited about, combined with the fact it will go to our Harvey Transportation Center, which will now be a multimodal center with Metra. And it will go from Harvey all the way up to the Red Line by CTA. So it's really a multimodal service. That's our next one. Then we're doing 95th Street from 95th Red Line Station all the way out to Moraine Valley. And we're also doing Cermak Road from the Pink Line. So these are the ones coming. We have future ones down the road and we're starting on the funding of each of them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Lewis or Director Groban, go ahead.
Thank you, Mike. And thanks for coming in this morning. A couple of questions. One around fare integration. Do you have, that's a hot topic across all the service boards, obviously. Are you kind of budgeted to drive that? And do you have any specific, I guess, initiatives or projects? And then I've got a second just to follow up.
Sure. Yes, fare integration is very important to all of us. We have worked diligently with both CTA and Metra to work together to get new monthly passes out there this year and last year. We are the ones, we're going to be the beginning of the ADA fares where we're going to allow passengers to ride our ADA fixed route system for free. Our ADA certified passengers will ride our fixed route system for free. Why are we doing that? Number one, again, capacity concerns on our paratransit. If we can move people to fixed route, it's terrific. It gives our riders more options, which is always something that we're trying to do. And the third thing, again, is it's more efficient for the system. So that's the newest thing we're doing, and we're working with CTA and Metra all the time. I will add, one of the things that's been interesting this year, Dorval gave me a call. They were doing rehab on the Blue Line, and we have a lot of service that intersects with the Blue Line going to the Green Line and Pink Line. And he gave me a call and he said, is there anything you can do to offer free rides and we'll reimburse you? Because we have funding, we work together and we get those type of things done. And so I cannot tell you with a stronger voice, how diligently we're working together to try and move passengers, whether it's on Pace, CTA, or Metro. We're trying to just get our passengers to have the best ride they can get.
Great, thank you. The other question was around, there's an other bucket in your budget. Can you tell us a little bit what's in that bucket and what's driving it? It's about a third, increased by about a third from 23 to 24. Can you tell us kind of what are the drivers?
Melanie, you want to take, we'll let our department manager of budget answer that. She'll look it up and we'll chime in.
Generally, as a whole, other, is things like professional services, contracting, so that the services that Melinda mentioned earlier, the capital items that were traditionally capital funded but were covered with operating, but they got delayed into 2024, it's that kind of stuff. So right now, we're in some operating funds for some design related activity for some of the pulse construction projects. We are also using it for some major IT upgrades that previously we probably would use capital funds for. But in order to preserve the capital funding for things like electrification and space, kind of a funding, you know, it's a funding vacuum.
Was that a concern?
Yeah,
Okay. I thought this one was possibly creating the issues, so I didn't use it. So that is mostly what is in the other category. So that's why you do see that large percent increase. Is a lot of that, almost 10 million of it is that delay in projects that were supposed to start in 23 that have been delayed. Those projects have been initiated. We have a kickoff on a major IT project tomorrow. So things are happening. But that's part of that increase is really those, it's part of the under budget condition in 23, but also the increase then into 24.
I might add, I'm not sure it's in this bucket. It's in one of our buckets. That's why I have Melanie over there. But the one thing that I did want to add is that we are looking at our entire system, our revision program. We met with our consultant yesterday. He's going to be starting the project. We're going to be meeting with communities, townships, municipalities, the RTA. We're going to be meeting with a lot of different groups to see what you want to see in transit in the future. The other budget takes some of this consulting money so we can do that. Why are we doing that? Because we need to look at our entire system. Our system up to now has been so fare box recovery driven that if you look at a map of Pace, all the fixed routes are where we get the most money. It may not be the most equitable. It may not cover the most service that we need. So one of the things that we've asked our consultant to do is to look at our entire region and see how we can connect people better and not focus so much on the fare box recovery ratio. Once we do that, then we're going to be coming back to you and saying we need more money.
Very good. And since it's part of it, at least seems to be kind of a timing effect. You expect you're not going to, you won't see this repeated then in 25 and 26.
No, and that is why the growth rate year over year does decrease into 25 and 26. We're seeing a large increase into 24. It's about 13% on the suburban service side. And that settles back down into a more traditional about 3.5 to 5%, average is about 4% into 25 and 26. So yes, it is sort of a peak, and then it should level back out in the out years.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excellent. Director Lewis.
Melinda, thank you for a great presentation. And let me say, as a resident of the South Suburbs, there's lots of positive buzz about what Pace is doing, particularly on the Halsted line, on the Route 30 line, the Chicago Heights and the Homewood and the Harvey access points. There, a lot of people are very pleased about that.
Great.
Just like with Dorval, your comments made two questions go to three, but I was trying to keep them at two. The question it prompted was, Dorval talked a lot about how they've had success in hiring, particularly operators, and you kind of mentioned that yours is more challenged. So I'm trying to understand the difference between the success that CTA seemingly had with some of the same tactics, and I think it sounded like you're not having the same level of success in terms of getting staffing for some of the transit commitments that you have.
I think our success mirrors each other. I think what you're seeing in transit, the most important thing, what we keep pushing on is what has been very successful for us is hire on the spot. So traditionally transit, you'd come in, you'd fill out your application, you'd wait a couple of weeks and then, or more, and then you'd be called back in, then you have to go get a physical, you have to do all these different things. And so by the time you got hired up, you're a month later. Our goal is we get you in, we hire you right there. If you meet our qualifications, we go through them, we interview you at that moment. And then we proceed to get you into our garages and starting right away. Why did we do that? Because we don't want you to run to someplace else because you need a job. Let's get you and get you started in the process. So that's one way we've been very successful. We've also been very successful in our partnerships with community colleges. Started with one, Olive Harvey. We've expanded throughout the region. Most community colleges are now working with us. And we pay for you to get your CDL, and we pay for you to learn how to get your CDL. And then once you pass, you immediately come into our system and we begin training you. So we've had a lot of success, but we also do have people retiring. This is an age when people are retiring. So we're constantly hiring, and that puts a lot of stress on your system. I think Dorval mentioned that, you know, this is that most people he's hired in 1 year. Same for us. We have hired more people this year than we've ever hired before in 1 year. And normally when we're hiring for a big project. We're not hiring for a big project. We're hiring to get our staffing levels up and beyond so we can continue to increase our service. But I'd say we've been successful, but we have to continue to push.
Okay, thank you. The other two questions, which I'll make one, there's a great deal of a commitment for, there was a line on the budget for unfunded mandates and the funding that you get for that, but there's a great deal of dependency in a lot of the suburban communities for you know, PACE transportation services. In fact, if it weren't for PACE, there'd be no transportation services. The question is, I know Tony Preckwinkle's put some money there. Are the local entities contributing financially to the need as opposed to just the traditional funding sources? Is that a conversation or an objective that PACE has in terms of trying to look at alternative funding sources?
So the answer, you're absolutely correct. Cook County has put in money for us to increase service on our Route 352 to get the headways down to about 15 minutes, which is what it should be. I have mixed emotions about the comment that you made about, you know, are the south suburbs putting money in? One, yes, on the dollar right side. So by law, we're required to do ADA service within 3/4 of a mile of a fixed route, same day, same hours. There's areas that don't have fixed route, so they have no ADA service. So the townships and municipalities will put in money to match our money to get service. We also have municipal van pools that are out in the south suburbs. The caution that I have, and what we have historically done, is communities will say, I want a route, and I'm willing to give you money towards that route. And we're like, great, we'll put that route out there. The problem with that is the communities that can't afford it, then don't get it. So it's a mixed bag. I will also say we have some partnerships with Amazon and UPS to get service out from the south suburbs to their locations. So we do accept money. If there's money out there, we accept it. But I do caution you because it becomes the situation that it might not be equitable if you're only going where the money is.
Dr. Gorman.
Thank you, Chairman Dillard. Thank you, Melinda. Lori, great seeing you again. Appreciate your guys' presentation. Also, thank you for your proactive, you know, programs that you're doing with ridership. I know there was, we participate along with Director Lewis in the south suburbs for the kickoff in Harvey. I'm curious how that program's going, and are there other areas that you're piloting or targeting for those other types of rideshare programs? And if you can just kind of expound and explain to the other directors about how people come off Metro at various hours and what you guys are doing out there.
Yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up. So we provide late night, first mile, last mile service out of Harvey, which combined our 352, our Halsted Street route is a 24-hour route. People get off that route. That's the only 24-hour route in our system. They get off the route. What do they do to get home? Or if they're home, what do they do to get there to get to their job, you know, in the middle of the night, third shift. So we have started our Pace Connect service out of Harvey that you can use an app or you can call and get a vehicle. It's fully accessible. You can take it to our transfer facility in Harvey. You can transfer to a Pace bus or to Metra. We've done the same thing on the north side with CTA. You can transfer from one of our Pace buses at the Blue Line to take Pace Connect, or you can transfer from the CTA, get on one of our buses and take Pace Connect. We've tied it all together with an app that is called Transit, and I urge you all to download it and then put the little Pace logo on it, because I like you seeing your Pace logo on your phones. But why did we combine it all? Because Pace has a lot of different ways we do business, and it's very hard for our customers. Well, I want to take CTA to a suburban location, then I want to get on Pace, and then I want to take the on-demand, or I want to take Pace Connect. How do I do that? So we have one transit app now that combines everything, combines CTA Metra information, combines our information, combines our on-demand service, our Van Go service, and our Pace Connect service, the late night service that you were talking about. So it's pretty easy to use, and then it will switch you to the right app. You can even pay on it if you switch over to those other apps. It's very important for us to get this connectivity down. We're going to be adding paratransit. That's our goal now, which is much more complex in the coming year. That's the one we want to add on. So we have all of our services on one app. If we achieve that, I believe we'll be the first in the country to have all of our service in one app. So that's our goal. I might be here next year saying we're still working on it, but we're going to keep shooting for it.
Good, so that'll be expanded to other areas once you see how this.
Right now it's expanded. Oh, the Pace Connect, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Pace Connect, if there's another area where we find a need, we will put it other places. We think it's working well. We have a lot of riders using it. We started it in June, July. You might remember the exact date, somewhere in there. And we already have over 500 trips a month using that late night third shift service. But we have to find the right niches to do it.
Great, thank you. And just my other line of questioning, you've already addressed, you know, as far as the integration, appreciate your collaboration as you discussed. Also, you mentioned in your slide on page 7, the DBE. Actually, I believe Lori addressed that with the federal participation requirements. What about the agency requirements at the state level beyond the federal requirements?
No, so we do apply a goal to all of the contracts that could potentially use a DBE. So whether it's federal or state, we'll still do it, but it's just that the federal is dictated or is required. But we are working for 2024 to expand our program and start doing a goal on the state funded contracts.
Okay.
And I will add one other thing, what you don't see in our numbers, which is when we purchase vehicles, the federal government has assigned already what the DBE component has to be to that. So that's a separate number that you will not see, but it's assigned to all our big vehicle purchases.
Alrighty, great, thank you. And then just also, thanks for the electrification, and you guys have done really a good job. I know that was, you know, a couple of years ago and in the making, and it's really has, you know, progressed into a great program. And, you know, I don't see anything along the lines of biodiesel, you know, that's something maybe we can discuss, you know, at a later time, and that transition from, you know, the diesel, biodiesel to the electrification.
We actually have some experience with biodiesel.
great.
Many years ago, we used it, we tried it. It's not as easy as it sounds. You just don't put it in the bus and boom, it goes. You have to do some changes so the filters don't get clogged. And it was very labor intensive for us. It also is not less expensive than diesel. And I agree with what Dorval said earlier. The new diesel buses are much better for the environment than in the good old days when you saw black fumes coming out of the back of a bus. So we've looked at it, we've played with it. It wasn't something that was very easy for us to implement on a grander scale. But we'll be happy to discuss with that.
Great, no, that's good to know. Thank you. I appreciate that. And just one last area is the vacancy factor. You know, I kind of touched on that. Do you guys have a vacancy factor of unfilled positions? I know you mentioned earlier that your hiring has increased. So are there any lulls or do you see any unfilled positions or?
There are no lulls. We need to hire. We need to hire. And I'm going to tell you that operations positions are really hard to hire, and it's something that we're always looking at. Reason why? A lot of people like to work from home sometime. I can't have my bus drivers working from home. You know, there's a lot of requirements. You have to be on time. You have to be safe. There's so much to being in the operations position that we have to continue to push that. And then you go into management. It's a 24/7 day a week job. You don't sit at home waiting for someone to give you a call. So our vacancy rate on the bus driver side, we're about 200 right now. We were at 400. We've cut back to about 200. I want it to be 0. I want us to be hiring beyond that, so that we can put more service out there. We have taken the approach that because we don't have the drivers to do a lot of things, we actually, you remember last year I was here, we cut back some of our service, the service that wasn't very efficient. And we're looking at new ways to do that service using TNCs, and we've started to implement that.
And it's a great program that you mentioned about the community colleges and paying for the CDLs and, you know, so I commend you on that, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Carrie.
I have just a couple questions. First of all, on the electrification project, what criteria did you use to determine where to put it into the garages in the 5-year program?
So the criteria we use, there were several. One is in historically underserved neighborhoods, areas that have high pollution rates, things like that. That was one criteria or two. But the other is the distance a bus can go. So we had to do a whole study of every route in our system and determine how long that bus can be out there and return to the garage and get filled up with electricity. Why is that important? You could say, well, we don't really care too much about that. You know, we're just going to put more buses out on the street. The issue for us is we don't have the drivers then. So we really had to focus in what routes can travel far enough and get back to their garage. Our Waukegan garage could do that. So that's why it's the first one. It met all 3 criteria. It's the first one that we're going with. We also, as I said, we have our first electric bus in. We chose 95th Street, again, because of the representation there. We wanted to get that bus out on 95th, so we'll go all the way from the red line all the way out to Moraine Valley College. Our choice, don't know that we can do this, but our choice is to get our buses back in the garage at night, charge them, and not have the infrastructure needs in the middle of the route.
Right.
Several reasons. It's very expensive. Second reason is we don't want the driver downtime if we can help it. You know, we want to keep the buses moving. But we are also in constant communication with the CTA. If they have an infrastructure and our buses are going through their station and we can charge there, we'll do that also.
Yeah, that was appreciate that comment. That was a question, how closely you're coordinating with the CTA when you can for the charging infrastructure. And then the other question I had related to all the routes that were suspended in 2020 and how many of those, and I know you said earlier you're looking at your service overall, big picture, but have any of those been reinstated, and are you looking at reinstating, and particularly some of the Metro feeder routes?
So the answer is about 69 routes, might be off by 1 or 2, are permanently gone, discontinued.
No intention to put them back. Is that what you're saying?
Well, let me,
Okay, sorry.
no, I'm just gonna
Sorry.
finish. So those are mostly Metro feeder routes. Why were they discontinued? I'll tell you the reasons why. Number one, most of them did not have the ridership levels that we needed. Second reason is with the parking lots being open at Metro, because people aren't going downtown every day, our bus was not competing with that. It just wasn't. So that's why we're looking at doing different ways of having the service covered, like, you know, where we have the On Connect service that you can connect to the stations, or we have our Van Go program where we leave a van. We have some at CTA stations, some at Metro stations. You subscribe to the service. So we get background check, things like that done, make sure you're trained to operate a van. We leave the van at the station. You call the night before and you say, hey, I want to go from, you know, the Palatine Metro Station to Harper College. And we give you a code, you punch it in the window, it unlocks a lockbox inside with a key, and you can take that vehicle to Harper College and then bring it back the next day or that night and park it there. We'll fuel it, be ready for you the next day. So we're doing different ways to get people what they need. But we're not gonna put a big bus out there where it just isn't effective.
Okay. So are there other routes? I mean, I think there were 80 some that were, you mentioned 69.
We put some back. We put them back partially, the segments that have worked. We've put some back during the times they worked. So we have put some of the rest of them, I think there were about 69 that we didn't put back, but the rest we put back in certain different stages.
Okay.
Maybe not the whole route.
Okay. And let me go back to the van thing for a second. Is that more cost effective than just partnering with Uber or Lyft to have that person go rather than have them take a van and it sits somewhere for a day?
It is, well, there's several reasons. Yes, it is, but I'll tell you the reasons why it is. First of all, we had one of the largest van pool programs in the country when COVID hit. And guess what? Everybody turned in all their vans because they were staying home and working from home part-time. So we had to reimagine how we're going to use those vans. We already have them. So I tasked my maintenance department to figure out a way to get that remote entry. So we're using those vehicles. That's one reason. I think the second reason, these are trips that aren't every day. These are that we can leave these vans there, and it is more cost effective to have it there. People will use it. Uber and Lyft we're looking at first for our ADA service. And we're looking at different ways to use Uber and Lyft. But the one caution I have there is we are really pressing Uber, Lyft, and we have another company that we use called UServe, which is, it's an East Coast company that we've gotten to do service out here, and they're doing a very good job for us. They have to be accessible. And that's what we're working on now with them, because, you know, you want to do more transit work, then you have to figure out a way to partner with someone to get accessible vehicles out there. And so that's our push for next year.
Okay, great.
And
Great
we'll
information.
report to you at the end of the year if we did it well or not.
Okay.
I'm
thank you.
hoping to do it well.
Thank you.
Just one comment, it's a compliment.
We'll take it then. Thank you.
A member of my service, one of my service clubs who knows I'm loosely associated with transit, complimented Pace on how clean the buses are in Joliet. And I think that just speaks to rideability, frankly, when people see that the buses are well maintained. I think feather in your cap.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Our team does a really good job on that. And I will tell you, during the pandemic, we stepped it up and we've kept that up, you know, upward trend. The cleaning on our buses is tremendous. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Jim Dewinski, and the Metro crew.
Okay.
Well, good morning, Chairman, members of the board. On behalf of Metro's board, our entire staff and our passengers, I thank you for the opportunity to be here today to present Metro's 2024 budget, update on some Metro activities, and our capital program. With me here today is our CFO, John Morris. Next to John is Aaron Martiz, our Director of Operations and Planning. Next to Aaron is Janice R. Thomas, the Deputy Executive Director for External Affairs. And also with us here today is Lynette Savarella from our Strategic Planning. Next slide, please. So we finished at almost the same time the RTA finished our 5-year strategic plan. It was a great experience to be working side by side so that our strategic goals aligned with the regional strategic goals. This is just a snapshot of the work that we completed and passed and put into practice in February of 2023 and takes us through 2027. Next slide, please. So just a brief little look at our ridership. The blue bars indicate the average monthly ridership throughout the last 12 months. As you can see by the blue bars, we've actually had a 50% increase in ridership year over year. Currently, right now, we are running at about 56%. Next slide, please. 56% on the system on a weekday. When we take weekdays in consideration, we take Monday through Friday. So we see depression on Monday. We see significant depression on Fridays. This is a pattern we're seeing throughout the country. So that equates to right now currently a 56. But I want to draw your attention to the yellow area. That's line by line, some of the individual peak days. So just last Tuesday, the UP North line hit 91% of its 2019 numbers. And we're doing this in many different ways. Sometimes the fact is the patterns just aren't even to be explained. Yeah, it's one thing, Taylor Swift comes to town or there's a huge event down at McCormick Place and you can kind of very much isolate it. But when you're looking at it as a network, what we've come to believe and realize is that we're moving more unique riders today than we were in 2019. They're just not riding 5 days a week. We know for the fact that our riders actually were the ones that left the system in the biggest droves, down 97.5% in April of 2020. They're also going to be the slowest ones to come back to the system. But we do see slow and steady growth as the previous slide shows. Also, this slide here also represents a snapshot into the weekend and off-peak service. You can see on Metro Electric there running at a 106%. From pre-pandemic numbers. And that's because of the service level we put out there. We like to refer to the service level patterns on some of our more robust services as regional rail, and a little bit more on that to come. Can I get the next slide, please? So highlights of our 2024 operating budget, a little over $1 billion. So it's a 4.9% increase over the 2023 budget. Most of this is due to inflation, contractual obligations. We're starting to see, like a lot of people, medical premiums, fuel, really driving some of our costs. The budget projections are for 24 are going to lift us from 32 million projected rides to 40 million rides. And I'll talk a lot about that, why we came up with some of those numbers in a second. And revenues will move from 148 to 190. And again, there's a lot of moving parts and variables on the budget process with regard to fare revenue. So overall, we are going to expend out all of our COVID relief money by Q1 right now, forecast of 2026. The next slide, please. We'll show you that 3-year projection. So in 2026, we do look to have a hole of $275 million. COVID relief money will just carry a little bit into Q1 of 26. But I do want to be transparent and point out where we identify middle of the chart there, funding for capital, $60 million. Metro, for its first 35 years of operation, traditionally set aside something we call METCAP or fare box capital, utilized for local matches on grant applications, specific special projects. We've not been able to do that with the COVID relief strings that were attached to those dollars that came from the federal government. So we are going to continue now getting almost into a catch-up mode on that. As we go through our federal program of our capital program, also kind of emphasize why it's important for Metro to set aside some money internally on our program so that we can go ahead and leverage some more capital grants. Next slide, please. So the fares, this is the biggest thing that we've done forward facing to the public. And I say that because the public really doesn't see much other than the conductor, the train, and the fares and the fare tables. This is an old slide. It's 10 different sectors that we have, 10 different zones. Traditionally, they were 5 miles apart. A few years ago, we did a little experiment collapsing some of the most outer zones. Really didn't produce much in the ways of any increased ridership. So looking at this system, our board directed us to make a system that is more easily understandable, will drive ridership, and simplifies it for both fare collection and use by the customers. So we worked on this for about 9 months this year with our board. 14,000 comments came in from the public, numerous working groups with our conductors. We sent people all over the country and specifically even touched parts of the world looking at best practices as we wanted to really take the good step and make this like a one-time switch. So I'd like to go to the next slide and show you what it's going to look like now as passed by our board last Friday. So we're going from 10 zones to 4 zones. It's a huge jump. Aaron's here if anybody has questions specifically about why we picked where we picked on the specific zones, but most of it has to do with service delivery. Areas that had the ability to have a better service delivery, it probably was the other side of the zone, so they were a little bit higher price and less service delivery on a lower price. We have a lot of towns that actually have, they're split in the zones. So a lot of deliberation, coordination, best practices, a lot of analytics went to figuring out where these new zone breaks are. The one zone that's very simple to point out is downtown. Downtown is the zone where people traditionally come. 90-some% of our riders traditionally come into the Spoken hub and end up down here in the hub. So one of the things we did do during this fare proposal is we took a look at that intermediate rider. What are we doing to the intermediate rider to really attract it? While we're driving that train back and forth, there might be 100 people on it, but there's hundreds of seats available. We actually have lowered the intermediate rider, if you're not going downtown, to basically the lowest fare possible to really try to attract. And the cool part is 80% of our riders right now are using the phone, using the electronic app. So the data that comes in right now is immense. It's way better than it was back when we first started with Ventra back in 2015. So if you go to the next slide, this shows the simplified fare table that'll be up at all the stations, shows zones 1, 2, 3, and 4, the past products that are available and the price points. To be clear, the one-way ticket is still at a 2018 level or lower. The one-way ticket is what we use to multiply all the other ticket products. We are replacing the 10-ride ticket with the 5-day day pass. It still will have a 5% discount for the 10 purchases, but the biggest value to the customers is going to be the monthly. Traditionally, the monthly was priced at about a 34 times the one-way. Based on the ridership patterns that we've witnessed over the last 2 years, we're now pricing it at 20 times monthly. This is the ridership pattern we see. This is the ridership pattern that we believe will help the price point that will help attract new riders to the system. And again, with the slow and steady growth and not seeing plateauing, this thing also had to take into consideration Metro's promotional products, the $10 all-day pass, the $6 all-day pass for 3 zones of travel, and the $100 monthly Super Saver. So as you can see, for those dedicated monthly riders, $105 or $135 is not that big. It's a percentage big lift, but it is nothing compared to the traditional fare products that we had when we were multiplying the one-way times 34. So if I can go to the next slide, talk about one of the things that we learned over the last couple of years is the Fair Transit South Cook program. Metro partnered with Cook County and PACE on the Fair Transit South Cook program. That program is going to end now in January of 2024. And we're very excited to partner with the RTA and Cook County on launching an equity-based program, an income-based program. People all over the region, if they qualify for SNAP, will be able to access the reduced fare product. On the previous table, you can see that the reduced fare product for all zones basically is about half the price. We're looking forward to getting that data in and seeing how we're now basically able to provide a fair product to people that we may have traditionally priced people out of Metro service. So this is an exciting time for us. That program will be a pilot program. It'll run for about 18 months, and then we'll be reporting to the RTA and the Cook County how that program is going. Next slide, please, on our capital program. So 2024 capital program, a little over $574 million, funding 97 projects. The highlights of those projects are bridges, stations, yard improvements, and rail car rehabilitation. This is part of the broader 5-year capital program, which is just under $2 billion. Next slide, please. The asset categories that it does break down over the 5-year program, 33% of the 5-year program will be going to rolling stock, 25% to bridges, track, and structure. And then the other big hitters are facilities and equipment and stations and parking. Next slide, please. So a little, take you through some of the highlights of some of those areas. So rolling stock. Rolling stock, we've been rehabbing cars in-house. I think I've had some RTA board members come out there, take a look at that. This is really the diamond. We've been able to bring in about 120 union jobs, bring in that work in Illinois. The money goes out to Washington and now comes back to Illinois, providing for the rehab of those cars here on our property. We're rehabbing our Highliner cars, that's what HL stands for, at our South shop, KYD. Currently, the HL1s are going through a rehab. We actually are leasing those to NICD, so we're actually getting some bang for buck for the excess vehicles that we have right now. And then we're about to start purchasing the material to start rehabbing the HL2s. More to come on what we're doing with Highliners toward the end of the presentation. Nippon Sherrio cars, we have about 311 of those cars. Those cars are been going through rehab now, about 35 a year, and that program continues. We're starting to purchase the material to take Amarillos to the next cars. What you don't see in here, if you know Metro, you don't see Pullman and you don't see Bud. Those are our oldest cars. Those are the cars we intend eventually to replace. So the investment's going into the cars that we intend to keep around for the next 30, 40 years, and we're going to continue to keep running safely those old cars, but not really invest into them as heavily. F-59s, those are locomotives we bought used. We bought them from California and Seattle. We're giving them a second life. We bought them at 20 years old. We're probably going to give them 20 more years. The upgrade that we're going to do to these will be in partnership with an outside source. We're going to raise them up to a tier 3 emissions. So for Illinois, that's really good on considering. That locomotive you see in the picture there is called an SD70 Mac. That's a former freight locomotive that now is on property, pulling trains and revenue service. We've got 27 of those on order. I think 8 are on property right now. And that thing also is running tier 3 emissions. So that literally is Metra's cleanest burning locomotive. And I agree with both my other service partners. The biggest solution to combat climate change within transit is get people on transit. The vehicles that pull it, that's a nice bump, but getting people on transit is the biggest way we can actually address climate change here in the region. And then our switcher locomotives, a lot of those date back into the 40s, 50s, and 60s. We're going to be trying to upgrade those to tier 4 locomotives. Next slide, please. Quick update on your rail car purchases. Projects moving along by like a lot of massive big projects. There's slowdowns, supply chain slowdowns with little things. So we are a little bit behind where I'd like to be with these cars, but they are moving forward. The base order that we've funded is 200 cars. We probably need 400 cars to replace our oldest part of the fleet. So we'll be looking to figure out how to get more funding for that. We did apply for a rail vehicle replacement, was denied that last year by the federal government. We will be applying again in that program to try to get some more dollars. Next slide, please. For rendering only, these are what's called zero emissions train sets. We are in the blackout period right now on negotiating the purchase of up to 16 zero emissions train sets. We did receive a $169 million grant from CMAQ. This will help fund these train sets. The idea of these train sets is really to get them on property. Similar to bringing your first bus on property, this is literally going to be the first in the country on property. So we want to really get them here, kind of kick the tires or steel wheels, as you will, and start operating around the system. Our intent is to use them on the Rock Island first, where we have a very controlled environment. We also go through a heavy-duty residential area. I think they'll appreciate less noise and smoke once we get these on there. So hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll bring into our board a proposal for those zero emissions train sets. Next slide, please. Bridges, track and structure. We definitely have a lot of bridges. You'll hear more about that in the next slide. One of our biggest projects we're working on right now is the UP North bridges. We call these the South 22 bridges. And in the South 22 bridges built in 1896, I often point out a lot of our bridges, half of our bridges were built before automobiles were even invented. Those bridges were supplemented by a mega grant that we won last year of $117 million. Without that grant award, we would not be able to be moving this project forward. We have funded in our bridge program the design of and rehabilitation for 5 bridges each. I'd like to take your eyes to this slide and explain what we're trying to say here. So every single day, Metro trains operate over 926 bridges. Metra owns 446 of those bridges. Half of those 926 are well over a century old. They're safe. They get inspected. They follow federal requirements. We've built an entire bridge program over the last year to make sure that this doesn't get off of our eye. Of those bridges, 210 of those bridges are not at their maximum load. They are not at what they were designed for. They're still operating trains at full capacity, but they are at that point in time where investment needs to start happening. Several years ago, I brought to this board a picture where I showed you how many bridges we have. And if we started working on 20 bridges a year, it'd only be about 300 years before we caught up. This is a little bit different. We're starting to talk to the federal delegates and say, hey, we've got a program, we've got a plan. I'm not going to get into the details of that plan, but we'd like to get this done plan at about $140 million a year for the next 20 years. Or the really good plan, which is get $280 million a year for the next 20 years, would actually catch up that 210 bridge surplus right there. Every single year, bridges get examined. Like I said, they're safe, but we have got to start working on this. And again, when you take a bridge that was put in before automobiles were invented, you improve the community. The spans get taller, they get wider. Like looking at that bridge in the picture there, sometimes those columns underneath can be removed because of the steel that's used above. This particular bridge is out at Grayland. This is a huge station that's getting worked on along with this bridge over Milwaukee Avenue. Next slide, please. One of the things that we've been working on for the last couple of years is really enhancing the customer experience. So working on different ways to try to message. You go to a CTA station, this is just what you expect. You go to a Metro station, you're still trying to fumble with an old map or you're trying to fumble with your app. So these are the TroyNet signs that we've put out at 7 stations, and now we're funding, trying to get another 70 stations, I think, done this year. And these are going to be that real-time information. When is the next train coming? Not what is the schedule, and what is going on the tracks, which tracks it coming in on. So we're looking very much forward to modernizing Metro's experience for passengers. Other things that we are working on is starting to really work on our current buildings. A lot of our buildings were actually constructed. The ones Metro actually constructed were in the late 80s, and they need roofs, they need other things. And a lot of our other legacy buildings date back to 1926, eventually are going to need to be replaced. Next slide, please. One thing that ties with the fare product is the fact that we are moving toward ticket vending machines everywhere. Phase 1 is being rolled out right now. We're replacing our fragile point of sale system. That's where credit cards are used. That'll be replaced by February. These new machines can take all the new fare product or all the new methods of payment: Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, your Ventra card, and even old cash. These are ones here in your picture are actually Union Station. Our plans are to deploy completely down the BNSF line and then start migrating away from fare collection on the train over the several months that follow that. So this is a very, again, forward-facing, exciting thing for Metro as we continue to try to look at the best ways to have the customer experience. Next slide, please. So stations and parking, we've been working on stations at a level that we've never been able to do before, thanks to the capital program Rebuild Illinois. A lot of that money we dedicated right into stations. There's a list of stations right here that are actively going to be move forward in the 2024 program, but there's many other stations that already are in the program moving forward. So if I could go to the next slide, you can actually see here kind of the stages. 18 currently in development, 15 in design, 7 are going near construction, and 8 will be in full construction. So we've got a good year coming up, and we compared this back to 2019 before Rebuild Illinois came along, and we just didn't have the funds to really address the stations that we have. Metro has 242 active stations. We're building 2 new ones, so we'll be up to 244 within the next 18 months. Next slide, please. Also on stations and parking, we really are doing, trying to do a better job, ADA improvements, platform improvements, signage. Sometimes our system is intimidating. Getting to the station, and then once you're at the station, trying to figure out which track do I go on, what's what train am I picking, and that's where we believe all of this signage, along with app upgrades, are going to help the customer experience. Next slide, please. Our DBE, we had good DBE in the last period. Moving to the next slide, please. We met our goals similar to what Pace said. We actually have federal goals we have to meet. We also established non-federal goals, and we met those goals as well. We're always looking to enhance the DBE program where we can. We work with DBE vendors on a normal basis, workshops. We're always trying to grow people into that field, and very excited when we see successes in that field with all of our projects. Next slide. So this is the last thing I just wanted to mention before I hand it over to you to ask any questions you may have, and that is talking about Metro Electric. Metro Electric, we've been doing significant investments in stations, substations, rolling stock, rebuilding the cars on a much more readily basis. And the one thing that people don't know when you're on a Metro Electric train is that you're limited to 65 miles an hour. Now you might think, well, that's pretty good. That's faster than the CTA trains go. But we actually have track that says you can go 90. So one of the things that I put together and challenged my chief operating officer was to put together a multidisciplinary task force internally and try to figure out how we can get these incremental improvements. How can we actually bring the speed of the train up? What does that do? It actually opens up capacity on the rail line. It takes the passenger downtown quicker. Even if it's 3 minutes in, 3 minutes out, that's 6 minutes every day for an entire year. Starts really equating to a better experience. It decongests, it decarbonizes. So again, if we are able to do it and safely do it, then why haven't we been doing it? So the working group got together and they've been working on this for several months. They call the project MED 90 because that's what ultimately we want to get to. Some infrastructure improvements are going to have to get there. What I'd like to do is take you to the next slide and show you what it looks like to take a train at 79. So you're just trying to tighten it down?
128.
So it appears our video capacity is a little better than yours. But overall, the interesting thing is, again, you hear 79, you hear 65. How many people even knew that that's the actual maximum authorized speed for a passenger train? 79. That's what all of our other lines run, except for the BNSF. They only run at 70. Wherever we found slow orders or areas of the railroad that we can't run at maximum authorized speed, we are working with our freight partners, or our engineering are looking at ways we can improve that throughput and keep it safe, obviously. But it's interesting to think that we put all of this investment into this line. Those cars can go 113. We paid for that. And actually, the other thing that we did is we actually had to dial the what's called the acceleration rate down on those cars because the grid that we have supporting those cars couldn't handle it. So as we do these substation upgrades, as we convert from the 1920s and 40s and 70s equipment, and we modernize it, we're actually able to eventually get this line up to a much quicker speed that's going to increase capacity without much investment into the infrastructure. And so that's part of our program. Eventually, I'd love to see that someday get up to 90. That's going to take some significant infrastructure improvements. The guys that rode on that train that day, you saw the monitors. There was nothing to be not looked at. Wheel temperatures, bearing temperatures, electrical current. They looked at everything. These people have safety in mind. Everybody's wearing yellow. That's what we wear out there. But at the end of the day, it was a great endeavor. We've got to the point where believe it or not, we believe we can get this done in very short order without massive capital investment, at least on certain portions of that railroad. That railroad, when it was built in 1926, was never designed to do what we're about to ask it to do. I'm very proud of the team. So last slide, please. And with Oak Park Avenue, our media director, Mike Gillis, took this picture on his way into work one morning. I always like ending my presentations with a sunrise because it's a new day. Thank you. I look forward to any questions you might have.
Director Colson.
Hi, Jim. I've been riding Metro since before it was Metro, and I love it. But I have to ask you about some aspects of your new ticketing structure, which I will tell you right up front are not very popular in my area. And two aspects of it. You're eliminating the physical 10 ride ticket, right? And you're also, the physical one-way ticket is good only on the day of purchase and not for 14 days as it is now. Is that right?
As the new ticket vending machines get deployed line by line, and not until they get deployed line by line, that they will time out. Once you get the new ticket, it will time out on that day of purchase, yes.
Well, when are you gonna have, you're gonna put these ticketing machines in every station?
Yes,
And are you gonna put them in the outdoor stations? I'm thinking of
Yes.
Ely and Grayland.
yes. And they'll have some kind of covering. Each station's obviously unique. Some stations are inside the head house. Some stations, they have to have some type of weather protection. They were designed to be out here in Chicago in the outdoors.
When is that gonna be completed? Do you have any idea?
Completed, looking at the beginning of probably 25. We've been diligently working right now. I think we've got 22 out today. We're hoping to have somewhere around 40 some out by February, and then it accelerates from there.
Okay.
We're gonna go to the BNSF line first. That way we can take a good look at how the ticket sales are working on that line, how the conductors are working with the new tickets, and then from there, we'll make some deliberate decisions on how we roll it out on the other lines.
Okay, but as of February 1st, the way I read this, without a smartphone, the only way to ride Metra is to buy a ticket on the day of travel.
Yes, and you still can buy them on the train. We have not changed policy where conductors still have the ability to sell tickets on the train.
And, you know, there's an old saying, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Can you explain to me, and I've read all your literature and stuff, I still don't understand why you're doing this, particularly when at a time when we face a fiscal cliff and we're going down to Springfield to ask them for more money. Why are you doing this and why now?
The research before COVID really indicated that some of the fare products were a source of fare evasion. And so some of the things that we did during our deliberate looking at other railroads across the country was look at the different mechanisms they use to take a 10 ride ticket and not turn it into 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, or whatever it can happen. So we did work with conductors, we did work with other railroads, and then our planning people really tried to bring in all of the best practices they could to try to handle that component of it. It's not just about fare evasion. It is about the fact that 80% of our ticket sales right now have migrated to the smartphone, and the vast majority of our ticket sales, and we still, I think, have 13% of our ticket sales are out by mail. So that'll continue, but right now, definitely, this is a dwindling area of sales.
Have you done an analysis of who these people are, the 20% you say who don't use a smartphone?
I don't, Aaron, do you have any?
Who are these people? I mean, I have some ideas. I mean, it seems to me you've got visitors and tourists who are not going to download your app. Or you've got people who just choose not to download it, not take their phone on the train. You've got seniors who sometimes have trouble. I spoke at a Kiwanis club in my area, and none of them are going to download the app. They're just stubborn. You have the disability community, I think, which has trouble sometimes with the app, some of them. You have the occasional rider who really has to be motivated to download an app. And then you have people experiencing low income who may not afford an iPhone. I think it's 20% of the population of your customers is a pretty important part of it because it consists of so many of these groups that traditionally underserved by transit.
So to be clear, it's 20% of ticket sales, not the population. And to that end, we make sure that we still can sell on the train. We still can sell at stations. And I don't know if Aaron, is there anything else you could add to that group of 20?
Yeah, as far as the 20% of the folks who the 20% of ridership that does not use the mobile app. You know, I think you're correct that it's some seniors, some folks with disability, occasional riders. Those folks are still going to be accommodated by the fact that we will, you know, at this point, we have no immediate plans to take the ability to purchase a ticket with cash on the train. So folks will always have the ability to purchase it. Or I guess I should say folks will always have the ability to use cash to purchase a ticket to ride Metra. As we roll out the vending machines, once we can completely roll out the vending machines on a given line, I think as Jim alluded to, we may look at instituting a proof of payment system where you're required to purchase a ticket before you board the train, but you will always have the ability to use cash to purchase a one-way ticket, a day pass, a monthly pass, a weekend pass.
I predict if my crystal ball is any good, you're gonna get fewer occasional riders if people I talk to in my area. It's gonna be harder for those traditionally underserved, those groups. And then you're gonna have an awful lot more cash fares on your train. If you're concerned about the time of your conductors, I can just see you being overwhelmed with cash fares every morning. And I got lazy people in Glenview who are not gonna stand in line in the morning. They're not gonna get up 15 minutes early to stand in line, buy a ticket. They're just gonna get on the train and buy a ticket. I think that's an issue, and it's gonna really, the conductors may not have the time to collect all the fares. I just see those as an issue, and I'm sure you've talked about them, but I'm troubled by these changes, I must tell you. That's all. Thank you, Bill.
Director Gavin.
I just have one follow-up to that. Did you eliminate the surcharge for purchasing on the train?
Yeah, we're gonna remove that surcharge right now. We look at this as a transition period. Once again, as we pointed out some of our budgetary numbers, you can now clearly see how many variables we're dealing with. It'll be the product shift. It's going to be trying to attract riders that never maybe used the system before, because now the price point's low enough that for intermediate service, they can do it. So we're suspending indefinitely right now the surcharge on the train.
Thank you.
Dr. Carey.
I had a couple questions. The first one relates to fuel purchase. Traditionally, you've purchased in advance, quite a bit of it, and you're not now, and you're buying on the spot market. And there's a significant increase from 23 to 24. So what's your thinking there?
Well, last Friday during the board meeting, the CFO here smartly locked in half the fuel below budget. This is something, and John can attest to this if he wants to. This is something I bug him about sometimes more than once a day. We talk all the time. We are constantly watching the market. We are constantly with the vendors looking for the best price point. The truth of the matter is the lock that we got last year, it was low. And the lock we got the year before, it was really low. So this is more toward what probably the budgetary numbers are going to look like. But we did lock last Friday 50% of fuel for next year. And so far in 23, we've actually been able to have the spot market provide fuel benefit. One of our biggest expense savings is within fuel, and that is not because of usage, is because we've been able to, with that little sliver that we didn't have locked this year, utilize the spot market. The spot market right now, because of some of the stuff going on overseas, is a little high.
Okay. Okay. So it's something you monitor
All
all
the
the time.
time.
Okay. Well, interesting. I want to talk about the 60 million that you're taking out of revenue that would normally go to operating, moving into capital. And I understand the logic of when as an entity you're flush and you can afford to take revenue you don't need for operating and put it in capital. That's great, but that's not really the case here. So why are you doing that?
So it's an investment. One of the things that we've traditionally not done here at Metra is take a look at potentially financing some of our projects. Local match dollars, regardless of how you go ahead after financing, are going to be very important. Sometimes you can finance using federal dollars, but a lot of times you need local match dollars. So this is a strategy that we're looking at right now to start doing a little bit of self-help. I threw out the numbers at you. I know they're big. The $2 billion over the next 5 years only funds 40% of what we want to do. And so we're going to have to be very strategic. Our board is going to put together a finance committee to deliberately look at what our Metra's needs over the next couple of years. And in 26, when we run out of COVID money, this will be a stream potentially of a way to finance, but more so to even tackle some of these discretionary grants. You know, we all said that when the Infrastructure and Investment Job Act came out, the actual bottleneck is going to be local match dollars across the country, and we weren't wrong. There's many places that just cannot put in grant applications because they cannot amass the local match kind of dollars. So this puts us in a position to at least be a little bit more flexible as we deliberately try to go after some more federal dollars as well.
But it seems to me, and we're all about, trying to get the funding that the transit system deserves, both at the state and federal level. But should we not get there in time for 25, 26, whenever you start to, experience a gap, you're just gonna claw it back and use it for operating. Is that not the case?
And that's why it's part of the plan. It's not part of the budget.
Kind of a rainy day fund to a
Not,
certain
not,
extent?
I wouldn't even call it a rainy day fund. It's part of the plan. It's looking forward to the future, to a system that we've all talked about. We want to operate, to an idea that, service providers here, our service is important as sewer, water, police, fire. That's the way the state of Illinois needs to start looking at transit, and it needs to be funded properly. I think we've all, heard it from, President Carter earlier today. We don't have a governance issue here. We have a funding issue here. And once we're properly funded, these are the kind of things that can actually start fixing and building the system that we all want.
Okay, thank you.
Director Holt.
Thank you. Good well, still good morning. We've got 2 more minutes. A quick question for you all about the $130 million of RTA borrowing that is scheduled, that's allocated towards Metra. Where do you all stand in terms of being ready to actually spend those dollars? I know we allocated that quite some time ago now, and there's been conversation about actually undertaking the borrowing in the coming year, but are we actually ready? Are you all actually ready to spend the dollars? Or are we in a situation where that's going to be delayed further, and so it wouldn't be prudent for RTA to go out and borrow?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, we moved it 1 year out. Now we are completely ready. Everything's lined up on that 130 million in the very short term of the capital program. Many different projects inside there.
Okay, so I'm going to take that as that we're going to start spending you are ready to start spending.
We are
dollars.
ready.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Jim, congratulations. I did not prompt a third question from your presentation, so I only have 2. Because it's a very complete presentation. Thank you. The first question is, I know this whole concept of the universal fare card has been something we've been bandied about. I just wanted to get your take, because Metro has the highest cost structure of the 3. So from Metro's perspective, where do we stand with respect to that, and what are some of the major obstacles that still remain yet to be resolved in order to kind of get to some kind of solution? I know you've got the regional Connect Pass, which has been, it's almost like an add-on, but as far as the universality issue, just wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, I think we're fully supportive of it. And like you said, one of the bigger drivers was the fact that the cost allocation on the back end, who gets the money once it's paid. We're going to get through that. I'm not worried about that. I believe this year will again move us closer to a universal fare product. The one thing that we're able to do now, again, with the electronic data that we didn't have before, is we can actually see things that we just didn't see before. So today I know we sell about 43,000 monthly passes, and I know about 7% of the people that buy those monthly passes are taking advantage of that product, the Regional Connect Pass, and it grows every month. So it's only at 7, but it continues to go up. And that's the encouraging part. Through some deliberate advertising and word of mouth, I believe people are starting to recognize the value that these fare products have. 100% behind getting something that looks like a universal fare product in all of our hands in the near future. One of the other things that we all have to work on, and President Carter talked about it, our technology on the backside of this, and I didn't realize it was version 1. I did know that they were the guinea pig. They were the ones that got beat up pretty bad when it first rolled out. And we thank CTA for that when we jumped on 2 years later. But I think the advancement of this back office stuff is really going to be one of the most critical things to get done so that we can get to that product.
My second and final question is, I think Metra and Pace share a similar burden in that in a lot of the suburban communities, they really are the single source provider for transportation. I know that a lot of the TOD, and I know the TOD funding comes from the Fed as well as from local sources, but is there conversation about support from these local communities for Metra in the form of ongoing funding to assist with some of the plans that you have going forward? Is that something that's in discussion, in consideration, or is that not an issue?
Are you talking about development, or are you talking about existing stations?
Wherever there's a Metra stop, for example, like in Homewood, there's a big TOD project going on. That's going to be a boon from a revenue perspective for the village of Homewood. Are they providing Metra any ongoing funding or source, support, because without Metra, that TOD wouldn't work. You could go to Orland or any other number of Tinley, you could go to any other places. So I just wondered if that's a discussion or an opportunity that is being pursued by Metra to get funding, because funding, as you said, is the issue.
Yeah, so I would say this, there's several what I call organic TODs that are popping up all around metro stations throughout our service region, where developers have come in and basically said, I need to build right here, and you can see the metro station right over there. In the case of Homewood, that's a joint investment from the county. I believe we had some partnership there with Amtrak and IDOT as well. The actual station component of that, I don't believe the village is partaking in it with us, or even the developers partaking with us in it financially. But of course, we will support, and we do support anywhere that TODs do pop up around us. So one of the other ones that was more successful is around the Orland area.
I guess my question is, do they support you? I mean, I know we support them, but do they support you in the form of some kind of a funding stream?
Yeah, again, financially, they're not supporting that. There are certain communities though throughout the region that actually do fund the investment in the station, which is beyond the TOD. You know, they actually, Elmer's is an example that brought in a lot of money and is working together with the IDOT to do some improvements at that station.
Director Gorman.
Thank you, Chairman. Jim and Metro team, thank you very much for your presentation. Most of the questions have been answered throughout this discussion, so appreciate that, and I'm sure you all do too. Jim, I heard you on the radio, CEO, you should know. It was a nice Metro play about the on time and, you know, nice little plug for Metro. Today, you know, I usually take the Southwest line from 153rd, you know, into the station, but, you know, because of my schedule, you know, I did a alternate route taking Tinley 80th, and it was really a great, you know, train ride express. It was packed, you know, because of the express. So, and then, you know, on my Venture app, I realized the pilot program that was going on that we've discussed. So it was, you know, interesting to see firsthand. You said that they have pilots for 18 months. When does that end, or when did it start?
So the Fair Transit South Cook pilot will end at the end of January. That's where Metra, Pace, and Cook County partnered together to reduce the fares on the Rock Island and the Metro Electric. That is now going to be replaced per se, or piloted. The next program is going to be an income-based program for the entire region if people qualify for SNAP. And this is a partnership of RTA, Cook County, and Metra. So as we go through that 18-month period, very interested to see where we're potentially attracting riders we didn't have, or in some cases, as the Fair Transit South Cook fades away, are we going to lose some riders that were taking advantage of 50% fares that maybe now at full fares, which will be the new fare tables, did we lose some riders? And that data will be very important in our decisions in the future.
That's great. And then, you know, with the SNAP program, hopefully there's some consideration too for students, you know, and reduced fares. They already have reduced fares currently.
So we have, this will be our fourth program right now that gets people access to reduced fares, seniors, students, the ADA community, and now income-based.
That's great. I'm not sure how fast that Metro is going this morning, but it was moving. You know,
79.
on that express.
79, we don't go faster.
Well, okay. That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman.
Only get nervous when the bells go off. Any other questions or comments? Metra? My train was full this morning, so keep it up.
Full's good. And hopefully new schedules coming out here in Q1 as we get through this next period of time. This is typically a lull period of time for our ridership numbers, so not the best period of time to make predictions, but definitely hearing Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays, very full trains.
Thank you very much.
And Leanne's got something that she'll hand out for you. Meeting with you guys twice a year here like this, I appreciate it, but I'll leave a read behind. I didn't write it, so learn a little bit more about Metra. And you're always welcome to come out if you want to learn some more.
Thank you all. Thanks. All right, let's move on. Items 7A and 7B are the approval of contract and expense items as they appear on the board agenda. These items for consideration include 7A, which is an ordinance authorizing a contract for broker services for our loss financing plan. And Allison Novak is available for any questions. And 7B is the approval of travel expense reimbursements. Any questions or comments? Allison's here on the loss prevention. If not, how about a motion and a second that we approve items 7A and 7B? Director Groven moves that we approve 7A and 7B, seconded by Director Lewis. And Madam Secretary, why don't you take the roll, please?
Director Indulcio, Director Carey,
Aye.
Director Colson. Aye. Director Fuentes.
Aye.
Dr. Gathing.
Aye.
Director Gorman. Aye. Director Groven.
Aye.
Director Holt.
Aye.
Director Cattell.
Aye.
Director Lewis.
Aye.
Dr. Melvin. Director Pang.
Yes.
Dr. Ross.
Yes.
Dr. Sager and Chairman Dillard.
Yes.
We have 12 ayes.
Thank you. And 7A and 7B are approved. Item 8 is new business. Any new business to come before the board today? If not, it's time for adjournment. How about a motion and a second to adjourn? Director Fuentes moves we adjourn, seconded by Director Pang. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the service board.